we've lost the idea of what it means to be Catholic. If you want a working definition of Catholic discernment is knowing clean from unclean. That's what really gives us that separation from the enemy who's constantly pursuing any area of our life that is inconsistent with the indelible mark of baptism. That attracts the demon to us.
Every single Barnes & Noble in the country sells Ouija boards now. It's unbelievable. That and tarot cards and other kind of, I guess you'd call them mediums. These people are really playing with fire. Anytime
you invoke anything other than the true and living God outside into you, into your environment, into your area, you're invoking another entity. You need to stay away from that stuff. There's a palpable presence of the Blessed Mother during an extraction of an evil. When she comes in, it's just game over. It's tap out. One session, the priest was doing a litany of Loretto, invoking the Blessed Virgin Mary, invoking her presence, inviting her, and the demon says to him, every time you call her, she comes, she wraps her mantle around you. She's the spouse of God. Consecrating yourself to the Blessed Mother is wrapping yourself with her mantle, and her mantle is reactive armor. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get hit. It doesn't mean you're not going to bump your head and and it's going to scare the tar out of you. You're going to take rounds, but those rounds aren't going to penetrate your home, your family, your soul. She will preserve you in grace with the super merits that she possesses because of who she is.
Welcome back, Dan. Dr. Dan Schneider. It was a pleasure to have you last time and a pleasure to have you back.
It's great to be back. Thank you for having me.
So the last time you actually began us with a perimeter prayer. And then we were talking about how, given that I'm the CEO here, it's our family building, that you talked about authority. We're going to talk more about authority, but you explained to me how I have some kind of spiritual authority here. And you have the perimeter prayer and the Liber Christi method. So you thought it'd be appropriate that I pray this time.
It is appropriate.
You ready to rock?
I'm ready to rock.
All right. And the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Lord Jesus Christ, in thy love and mercy, establish a perimeter of protection around Dr. Dan Schneider and myself and all our loved ones, those who pray for us and their loved ones. May the holy angels guard us and all our possessions. Establish a perimeter of protection around Tan Books, the studio, and us, rendering us immune from any kind of demonic influence. I ask that no demonic bondage, door, demonic entity, portal, astral projection, or disembodied spirit may enter the space of 100 yards in all directions of us. I ask that any demons within this vicinity or any that should try to enter here be rendered deaf, dumb, and blind. That thou would strip them of all weapons, armor, power, illusions, and authority. That thou would bind, rebuke, and disable them from communicating or interacting with each other in any way. Remove them, sending them directly to the foot of thy cross. Jesus, Son of the Most High, I ask this in thy glorious and most holy name. Amen. The Father and Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. This is just something, Dan, that most of us don't think about, this concept of authority. And, we can all say prayers, but it's kind of humbling for me, just kind of being personal here, that given my position here in my relationship with this building, that I have a special authority.
Yeah.
And therefore there's prayers that are even more proper for me than for the other people here to say.
Yeah.
And that's just I think that's one of the main tenets of everything you've worked on, is understanding this authority that accompanies, whether we're talking about a bishop or a priest or an exorcist
or a
father in a home. Yeah. So why don't we just start a little bit? We're going to talk about all kinds of things in this episode, everything from witchcraft, occult, generational spirits, secret societies. It's going to be all kinds of fascinating things. But talk to us about authority a little bit, just for anybody who didn't hear the first episode or whatever, just so they can have an overview of kind of the structure of how all these things work, because I find actually very refreshing, or comforting is a better word, that the demons are the most relegated creatures.
Very much so.
Father, I think it was either Gabriel or Martha or Father Ripperger, I can't remember. They're just so limited in what they can do because of the jurisdictional constraints put on them. and the constraints that God has put on them. So this authority, if we all fully understand the role we play in these areas, things will go a whole lot smoother. So just help us with that.
Yeah. So first of all, we begin with the understanding that there's a difference between authority and power. Authority is the right to command. Power is the ability to do something. It comes from the Greek word dunamis, where we get to be able to, literally to be able to, but where we get the word power, mighty deeds, and it's extrinsic. Authority is intrinsic. So in Luke's gospel, the power of the Lord, that power of the Almighty will come upon you and overshadow you, the angel Gabriel says. And the power of the Spirit was upon Jesus for healing. Power is extrinsic. Authority is intrinsic. It's the right to command. So I have the power to repaint here if I want to. I could easily repaint here. I have no authority. You own these walls. Your family owns these walls. So I don't have the right to exercise that power. So there's a difference. In law enforcement, you have power is requisite to the sidearm that the police officer carries, and authority is his badge. So if we're leaving here and we get in a car and we drive down and we get pulled over by a Missouri state policeman, he's got the power to pull us over. He's got the sirens. He's got the weapon. You pull out a .45, 1911, a Beretta, whatever. Yes, sir. You're going to get my deepest respect. But if he writes a ticket to you or to me, there's no authority. He doesn't have that jurisdictional authority. So jurisdictional authority flows through office. So the authority structure it's based on one's intrinsic relationship towards the person, the place, of the object. In the Book of Blessings, the revised Book of Blessings, for example, it describes what blessing is and those in the Bible who bless. And it lists off different offices who blessed and then footnoted. And I went through all those footnotes, and every single one of those is either a priest or a patriarch or parent's blessing. And then as it describes a hierarchy of blessing in the church, it's paragraph 18 of the Book of Blessings, it lists off the right to bless is based upon one's orientation towards the church, within the church of Christ. So your office one's office within the church of God. And so that office, and it lists off bishop, and then if a bishop, then a priest. If a priest is present, he prays unless the bishop's present, and the bishop prays, and the deacon. And if the deacon can play certain blessings, and then if he's priest is present, the priest prays, and et cetera. There's a hierarchy down into lay people. And so even the few places where it authorizes lay people to do blessings, lay people cannot bless objects. We can invoke blessings. We just did the Epiphany blessing recently. Lay people should be doing that in their homes. Those blessings in the Book of Blessings for lay people are new homes. There's a blessing of homes and a blessing of new homes. Homes new to them. So you can invoke a blessing on your own home, and then persons or your family members. But it's based upon office. Mm-hmm. And so that office is very important for us to understand. And office the Latin is munus. It means office, task, duty, responsibility. It's an obligation and responsibility, but it's also a duty and a task. That's the Latin munus. And so if you have an office of head of household, you have a responsibility to engage. Now, the priest shares uniquely through his office as a priest forever. He has what's called the triamunera, the threefold office of healing, sanctifying, and governing, the triamunera of the priesthood. And so the priest has the duty, the obligation to execute his office by teaching, by sanctifying, and by governing, right? So, but it all is based upon one's office. Several years ago, back at the Year of the Priest, you remember Benedict?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, he gave 3 homilies on the triamunera. And when he describes the munus regendi, the office of ruling or governing, he links that office to what we know, the 2 ends of that, and that is he links it to Jesus' word to Peter in the Sea of Tiberias. Do you love me? Feed my lambs. Do you love me? Tend my sheep, right? So we see feeding and tending the 2 ends of the office for Peter, and then through them, the bishops and through the priests, but also we share in that in our own office as head of household, and that is to feed, to provide, and to guard, to protect. So provision and protection are the two ends of office. And so when you're working in spiritual warfare, if you're working in office under the right authority, you're working. It's safer. You're working safer. You're protected by that. And when you step outside of that protection, is when retaliation can often take place. So that's a elevator pitch on the basic difference between power and authority and how it's geared. It's based upon one's office, and that is, there's mistakes that certain Catholic authors make. Unbound, for example, it says that power is authority, and that's just not true. Power is not authority. They're two completely separately different things.
No doubt.
They're intertwined. Yeah. Power, authority, and supernatural merit, they call kind of work intertwined, but the demon's going to yield or not yield based upon that office.
Well, you can just, like you said, you just think about somebody with a gun. They have power, but they don't necessarily have authority.
Right.
It's easy to think about it like that. Now, let me just ask you all right, my wife is such a better human being than me. She's smarter than me. She's far more competent. She's got better control of her passions. She loses her cool less than I do. She's just holier than me in like every way. Why in the world do I have an authority that she doesn't have? That just seems to be backwards.
Right, because authority is not based on merit, right? It's based on office. And so, in fact, that the word in Ephesians chapter 5 where it says, wives, obey your husbands, right? We know when that mass reading comes out on Sundays, that once a year, all the guys kind of like bump their wives, like, yeah. I'm the guy, You kind of bow up a little bit. And then we stop listening, because what does he say to men? Husbands, love your wives, die for them as Christ died for the church, right? So, but that word upotasso, we hear subordinatio, you hear ordinatio, or order, beneath the order. So the Greek upotasso means to be ordered under. That's a battle. That's a military term. Right? When I flew in Iraq, I saw our tanks and Iraqi tanks in battle array. That's a military term, being ordered under. So when I was in the military, we would, we'd walk through post, and you would have 4 or 5 guys, and the senior ranking guy would go to the outside. So when groups would cross each other on the way to the commissary or whatever, the highest ranking guy is to the outside. So the two guys on the outside size up who's the higher ranking, and then the salute would occur according to that. So it's based upon the office. Now, I know plenty of soldiers or plenty of pilots that were far better pilots than I was, or far better soldiers than I was. That doesn't mean that I salute them because of that merit. It's based upon that office. So it's a military term, to be ordered under. And literally, it also means to be under the protection of. We lose this in our modern. We live in a modernist world. We breathe air that's slightly tainted with modernism. The water we drink, so to speak, it's modernist and feminist.
Yeah, very.
Yeah, and so we hear that word, to be ordered under or to be subordinate. It really means to be under the protection of, right? So it's to be. It's like a husband or a priest. A husband should take our wife and our children, place them behind us, hold up our shield, hold up our sword, and to defend them, to be under our protection. A pastor, those are under his protection. A parish priest, the bishop, a religious order, a monastery, they're ordered under that, and to provide and to protect. That's the key to understanding authority, and that's all it is. And it has nothing to do with merit. I agree with you on your wife, on my wife, and most wives. They're far superior spiritually, intellectually than most guys. Yeah. But they're under our protection, and that's what the authority means.
Well, this is all connected to me, like me being able to sit here and say this prayer and have some kind of special authority it's humbling. And I was thinking the same thing last night when I was preparing for this. My wife and I were talking about this, and how your book mentions I can use holy water, I can bless my wife and my children. And I just never really definitely thought about that in regards to my children. We've had some experiences there where my wife is like, you need to pray over your kid, for different things. And under the guidance of my pastor, we've done some of that. I've done some of that. And she very much was like, this is your job. You need to go do it. Kind of made me uncomfortable. I'm Mr. Catholic. I live in the whole Catholic world, but it kind of made me a little uncomfortable. But then you have to recognize kind of humbly that I have been given this authority over my family in a certain way, not by merit, but because of just the Lord made me the head of my family, Yeah. So it's just I think more men should And I think their resistance to this is kind of an embarrassment of like, I'm really not that good of a guy. You know, they have that experience as I do. So I think this is a very important kind of subject for people to embrace, and it doesn't give anybody an ego.
It's the opposite.
It's the opposite.
And how do you do that? St. Paul says, you die for them.
Yeah.
You purify them through the bath, to the your own death to self. I remember we had a case that came into a parish, and the priest says, I don't want anything to do with that. I don't want to put a target on my back, right? I don't want to pick a target on my back. You guys take care of it. And we're like, hey, Father, this is your sheep.
This is your sheep.
This is yours. So later that week, I was in and about an hour away, we had the fraternity of St. Peter, so I went to Mass, daily Mass. It was a Latin Mass. The priest was wearing a white fiddleback, stark white, with the Greek chi on the back, which is the X. Yeah. And so right at the elevation, the servers lift up the back of the fiddleback, and my eyes just, the movement caught my eye, and he's elevating the host, and there's this huge red X on this priest's back. Amazing. And I said, there it is, There it is. You put an X on your back when you prostrate yourself. Oh,
that's right. It's a target on his back.
You put a target on your back, a priest of the living God. But you know what? We put a target on our back.
Right.
The minute we said, till death do us part, we made that commitment. Our sacrament, our office flows to our sacrament and our sacramental orientation to the church.
Right, so those who are listening and not watching, you were just pointing to your wedding ring.
Right.
And that's really pretty cool. This is like putting a target on our backs. That's a cool
you're
analogy.
Like game on. Because if we're just living, we're just living with our girlfriend, the demon doesn't care. He's not going to. Not until what does he care? You're not a threat.
He doesn't want to interfere because you're doing exactly what he wants.
Right. He hates the church and he hates the domestic church.
Yeah.
Right. And what he's going to do? When we were in the military, we wore subdued brass. Right. You remember Forrest Gump? And I hate to bring up movies, but Forrest Gump, he salutes Lieutenant Dan, and he said, "Don't salute me. You're trying to get me killed." Right. We don't salute in the field. You don't wear shiny brass in the field. You wear subdued brass. It's black, it's green. So the enemy can't see the shine, and the snipers hit you. So the enemy knows he's not going to try to snipe a private. He's going to try to snipe the commander. He's going to snipe. You kill
awesome.
You strike the leader, and then you can create disarray.
Yeah. And so we know how he's doing that with men in this world.
Sure.
We all know that.
Yeah, and again, it's not about. Like when I travel, oftentimes I'll sit in my closet and, I've lived a full life. I've had a lot of life experiences, I'll sit in my closet though, and I can't decide what to pack. Yeah. And my wife will say, this matches this matches this, matches this, do this. And it's not about those little things. It's about your orientation, towards the spiritual realm. Do you place them under your protection spiritually? And I tell especially military guys, that when you're praying, you need to be a Marine sniper. You need to be an Army Ranger. You need to be a dirty, nasty, mean grunt that will suffer anything in prayer for you when you're doing battle spiritually. But when you're dealing with them, you need to be, I always joke and say, you need to be an Air Force officer, just a gentleman, nice guy, nice shine on your shoes, kind of laid back, just be as amicable as you can, but turn that manly desire to fight, to be challenged, to do battle, turn that towards the enemy in prayer. And again, St. Paul tells us through sacrifice.
Speaking of battle, our country's going through a lot of battles, and it'll be interesting to see if the deportation efforts of the Trump administration have an impact here. But I think it's well known that the gangs, primarily the Hispanic gangs, they have a demonic underpinning to a lot of them. I mean, MS-13 at the highest levels, my understanding is they're demon worshipers.
Yeah.
And I'm certainly not saying that they're all anymore. I'm saying that all Masons worship.
These Argentinian gangs.
Talk to us about this, because this is run rampant in our nation. And I think that the Hispanic culture has been plagued more than other cultures with this. So what do you know about
I read an
this?
article recently that in Mexico, the police are now turning to Santa Muerte for protection.
Right.
So which is
that's yes. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So we have you have to distinguish between Satanism and Luciferianism.
Yes.
You know. So Satanism is more of the theology and the liturgical. How do we understand our theology? The church authentically interprets Scripture through her liturgy, and so you have liturgical. It's liturgical. It's ritualistic. And Luciferian is more philosophical. So you have philosophy and you have theology. Luciferian is more secularism, humanism, the one world order. The secular humanism that tries to create this idealistic society. You will have nothing and you will still be happy, right? You've heard that phrase from the World Economic Forum. Yeah, you have nothing, you'll be happy. You eat bugs. I mean, these are some of the crazy ideas these guys come. It's very anti-human in the name of humanism. But Satanism is going to be more ritualistic. It's going to be more sacrificial. Black masses, sacrificial, and so coming.
I think Luciferianism is actually kind of running rampant in Hollywood, whereas Satanism is a little bit less popular because it's hard to say I'm a Satanist. It's a little easier to say I'm a Luciferian. Yeah.
It's more. And again, you have, just like we have in Christianity, you have your high liturgy guys like us, and then you have the lower end, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious, and so I can.
And that's kind of that distinction between Satanism and Luciferianism.
Right, and you have you have your low level witchcraft here, and you have your high level Satanist way over here, and everything in between. But all of them militating against the church, against.
Now, would you call all this the occult? What is the occult?
We kind of fall under the occult, yeah.
Yeah. So when you say the word occult, you're meaning Satanism and Luciferianism, and what was the phrase you used for the Hispanic gangs?
Oh,
the Spanish word.
Oh, Santa Muerte. So Santa Muerte, you'll see.
What does that mean? What's the translation?
Saint Death or Holy Death.
Yes, right.
Holy Death, and it's an image of the Our Lady of Guadalupe with a skull, right? And so what you have is, instead of the new Eve is Mother of the Living, so she's Mary as new Eve. You now have death, Holy Saint Death, or this inversion. So instead of have the Mother of the Living, you have this Luciferian version of death, and so it's just becoming very dark and macabre. And again, in our lifetime, that's conspiracy theory, weird stuff, or that doesn't exist, or there's tiny marginalized, there's just a group of weirdos. And now it's becoming mainstream. What I've discovered too is I'm a scripture scholar, but also a patristic scholar, and even descriptions of this stuff in the early church. Epiphanius, a doctor of the church, an historian, describes how he was recruited by a group within the church called the Borborites that were doing rituals that were eerily similar to, Abramovich and the Hollywood elite rituals that you've read about, some of these people. So this stuff has not gone away.
This is around 400 AD, right? It's around Augustus' time.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, a little after that, maybe. Yeah, a little after that. So you're talking early church, post-Nicene period. Right. And he describes, the rituals, which
weren't they doing even like almost something similar to black masses? I mean, this was showing then that like within the early church, the establishment of the Eucharist as the source and summit of our Christian life is very clear, and the enemies of the church were already using it.
I already knew. They're already using it. They're already using it in a disordered. I wouldn't even repeat the stuff that on the air. It's just it's horrible, but. It wasn't like, hey, you guys have your thing, we're doing our thing over here. No, it was a complete and total sacrilegious inversion of the Holy Eucharist. Because this is, the Second Vatican Council says the Eucharist is source and summit. St. Paul, Colossians 2:17. These were the shadows. All the reality points to Christ. The Greek and then the Spanish and other modern languages translate it clearly. The Greek clearly, which is. All the realities point to the soma to Christu. You hear the word soma, we get somatic, body. All realities point to the body of Christ, everything. So when God became man, this is why we pray the Angelus in our
which we just did.
Which we just did today, and Catholics pray the Angelus, because we're recalling the Christ become incarnate in the world. So the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and that every reality points to Christ's physical body, his body, the church, his body in the Eucharist. all reality comes down to that reality of Christ. And so the demon's going to militate against that completely, because without this, we're nothing. It's what Saint Irenaeus, 2nd century, said: what God hasn't redeemed, what he hasn't assumed, he hasn't redeemed. And so what he has assumed, he has redeemed. He's redeemed us because he assumed our human flesh. Yeah. And this is why the demon militates so much against that: the church, the family, the Eucharist.
What is the speaking of the incarnation? What is that demon with the horns that they often put into the nativity sets around Christmas? What is that?
That's kind of that's Baphomet. That's a modern.
Baphomet is the demon's name.
Yeah, that's kind of the principal spirit behind witchcraft, and that's kind of a modern conglomeration.
Who names? Is that from the Old Testament or something? Baphomet?
No, that one. I don't remember exactly where that name came about, but that's kind of a modern post 1700s, post the Freemasonic type era. So what's interesting about that is that you see, again, everything that the devil does is an inversion.
Yeah, they always put him in the manger.
Right, so he's in a manger, but think about this. God established, going back to the authority, God established man as head of household, wife as the woman as his helpmate, right? From his side in equality, not from his heel, right? And inequality. From his side, she's equal to him, but under his protection. So you have the man, the woman, and then the creative order, the beast, that our dominion over the beast was seen in God having man name the beast, right? So by naming, we assert our dominion. So you have man, woman, and together dominion over creation. Baphomet's the opposite. You have the beast head, the woman's torso, and the man's lower body.
And you're saying that's how he's physically designed.
That's how he's designed. That's how he's designed. And then what's interesting, if you look at that, what do you see when you see that image, when you see that image of Baphomet be put up in public square? What is normally at his feet?
I don't know.
3 children, just like
Fatima.
Right. We are in the age of Fatima. We are living in the age of Fatima. We don't even see it. We're too blind to recognize it. We're in the age of Fatima and the promises.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Fatima talked about the attack was on the family.
On the family.
I mean, it all just connects.
Yeah. Sister Lucia, later in her life, as she was a Carmelite, later in her life, she was being interviewed by, I forget who it was a cardinal of the church, and she said the current battle between Satan and humanity is going to be over the family.
All right, speaking of, we got into a little pop culture a little bit there, but what is up with the, who's that lady in Ukraine who was made an ambassador to children?
Well, that's Abramovich, yeah. She's the high priestess of the Satanic movement in Hollywood.
High priestess.
Oh, yeah, she does the Borberite rituals. You want to know what they do? Look what she does.
What's her last name?
Marina Abramovich. So this is.
So who is this lady? I think I heard about it.
She's a power broker in Hollywood. She does ritualistic. They call it art. But again, look up the Borberites. What the Borberites are doing is what she's doing, and Borberites did in the early church. So it's the satanic rituals, other things. She calls it soul cooking and these other things. These are satanic rituals, and she gets named the ambassador of children to the Ukraine. That ought to tell you everything we need to know about our government, the Ukraine government, and Hollywood. And these are the power brokers, And I'm not a conspiracy theory guy. I'm just a ham and egg or blue collar guy from Ohio, But these.
Yeah, I did look her up. I can't remember how to pronounce her last name.
Abramovich.
Yeah, Abramovich. I did look her up, and I mean, you can just see pictures of how she dresses up and everything. I mean, it's kind of odd.
Yeah, you can kind of
very dark and strange.
It's very dark and strange.
But she doesn't really hide the fact that she participates in these. I don't know if she would consider it witchcraft. I don't know if she would consider it Luciferian activities.
It's satanic rituals.
It's just satanic rituals. And she is how in the world, like what universe do we live in, Dan, where somebody who participates openly in satanic rituals is the ambassador to children?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're going to drift into.
Wake up about this?
Yeah, we're going to drift into all sorts of.
How is that not on every front page in America?
Yeah.
Like, why do you have to come on a little podcast like this for people to know this? I don't think this is well known.
Yeah, no, because it's what did Chesterton say? Man can be blind to just about anything so long as it's big enough.
You're right.
And the devil hides in plain sight. That's another kind of truism. He hides in plain sight, and so you see very wicked people that are not Christian as we understand.
Do you think Putin would have appointed her ambassador of children?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I know. Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, so it's there's something really, really, really fishy about it. There's something very strange about it, and let's hope the new administration kind of cleans some of that stuff up. But there are dark forces working behind the scenes. And again, you don't look for the devil everywhere. We focus on our families, but you know, when there are evil forces out there that we have to be aware of.
Talk to us about generational spirits. And this is a big point, a big conversation here. And you're going to do, I hope, an entire book on this for us. Just a little plug for 10.
I'm 85% done.
That's so okay, good.
So
well, hopefully further than I realized.
I hope
it's amazing.
It was actually one chapter of the follow-up book to the manual. I had a chapter, and that chapter got to be so large that I contacted Jason and said, "Hey, what do you think about a freestanding book?"
Yeah.
The Spanish bishops have came out just recently and did a statement on it.
Hang on. Before you go.
On something similar.
Right. Before you get there, I want you to go there. But I just want to make it clear, like, the way I have heard it and the way my friends have talked about it is generational sin, right? And you're going to talk about this. But this is I think this is the topic where we say, oh, well, I have a Mason in my background and we have some kind of oppression today or something's going on weird. So a priest or somebody says deliverance prayers for anything in our lineage. Is that the general subject we're talking about?
But there's just a lack of distinctions. And so what the Spanish bishops have spoken out against was a phenomenon that came through a Protestant psychologist and missionary named McCall. And he coined the phrase that, as far as I can tell, intergenerational sin or transgenerational sin. They kind of use the term interchangeably. And what they're saying is your family has a certain sin that gets transmitted to you. And so if the sin is transmitted intergenerationally, then there could be intergenerational healing. Meaning, and so what's happening is, and then it turns into using the Mass to do intergenerational healing. So you're taking the Mass, the holy sacrifice of the Mass, and using it outside of its intended construct, and what the Mass isn't celebrated so that we can heal the family tree. We don't heal the family tree, we heal family members. And we have Masses said for the dead, right? We do sacrifices and prayers for the dead. We have indulgences for the dead, but we don't heal the family tree. So that's the confusion. And so this gets brought into the church through the charismatic renewal, Father de Grandis, and others that have passed away. And I don't think they were intentionally, they were genuinely trying to help people, and they're stumbling upon a phenomenon de facto in the field that there is some sort of connection between this guy I'm dealing with and something to do with his ancestors. So they're struggling with it. The problem is the error, the theological error is something that Augustine had debated in the
Pelagius, right?
Against Julian of Eclanum, who was the chief spokesman for the Pelagian movement. And that was an error called traducianism. You have enough Latin, you're a lawyer. Traduco means to hand over, hand down. It's also
trading.
To trade, right. It's also a Latin term for vine dressing. So you can dress a vine and you can make it go in a certain way to get more fruit from the vine. Right. And so in this error, it says that that I can generate a sin and give it to my children. So that's not true. To say that is to say that I created my children's soul and God didn't. So that's the error.
So the only sin that I pass to my children is original sin. That I do pat. That is a generational sin.
That is the archetypal generational sin.
Right, but I don't. If I have greed, if I'm an extra greedy person, right, I don't pass that to my son.
Right.
Okay.
So what happens is. That is what's the theological error behind the intergenerational.
And what was the error? Explain to everybody what the Pelagianism essentially was.
So Pelagianism was essentially a denial of the need for grace. Again, if you look at the marks of modernism and in pious,
was it because it was just the act of the will that could kind of overcome?
It's the act of the will could overcome it. Everything you need to overcome sin is in you. Mm-hmm. And Augustine very clearly showed. And it's through this debate that we get the dogma of original sin. Mm-hmm. So the Pelagians were an early church heresy that said basically your free will, there is no need for grace. It's all in your free will. So it denied original sin, and it denied the effect of the fall. And that's one of the marks of modernism. Remember, Pius X said that modernism, he wrote an encyclical on Adiem Laetissimum. It's on the 50th anniversary of the declaration of the Immaculate Conception. And he said that there's several marks of the plague of modernism. And one of the marks, which tie into this topic, one of the marks of that plague, he says, is a denial of the effects of the fall. So it's a denial of so we go back to Luciferianism. We just need to rebuild a humanistic society that the fall has no effect. If we just have enough strong will and if we get enough together like-minded good people that we can create a perfect society. And that undermines the effect of the fall. Another mark is a denial of a rejection of the authority structure, right? A denial for the need. Another one, and interesting, is a denial for the need, the redemptive value of suffering. And all this ties into this very topic. Because if the authority structure is to provide and to protect, there are certain acts that can be committed. And this is what I'm doing in the book. I finished these chapters on Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas, which laid the foundation for our understanding, Catechism 1471 to 1474, that there is a need to make satisfaction for the temporal punishment due to sin, even after those sins have been forgiven. So sin has two effects. So
I kind of consider that, is that reparation?
Right, reparation. Right, redemptive suffering.
Right.
So,
and I've always heard the analogy: the axe goes in, that's the sin, goes into the wood.
Right.
You pull the axe out, that's confession, that's your penance. Your penance helps you remove that act, but then reparation fills the hole in over time.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's. I have a more blue collar analogy. I get mad when I leave here, Tan Studios. I know which one's your car, and I'm mad because you offended me, and I got my feelings hurt, and I pick up a big brick and I smash the windows in your car. I drive off in a huff. I get halfway back, and I'm like, oh, I feel really bad about that. I come back. Hey, Conor, I'm really sorry, man. I broke up the windows in your car, you know. You're a good man of God. You're a spiritual brother. You say, no problem. I forgive you. And then I start to get it.
And then I send you the bill.
And then you say, hey, before you go, you might want to get your checkbook out. So you forgive me, but there's still some satisfaction that needs to be made. Okay, so the Catechism affirms this. And so we separate between the sin. The sin clearly doesn't pass. So it isn't like my family has the sin of alcoholism and yours has rage and yours has infidelity. But what passes down is the punishment of sin. That St. Thomas.
See, that's the distinction there. I got it now. I got it. I was wondering where it was going.
So Thomas says
the punishment.
The punishment. He asked the question early in his writings in the sentences. Well, he's building on Augustine, who has this debate with Julian of Eclanum. Augustine says, "Are you crazy? God says, I will punish to the third and fourth generation, to those who hate me. I will visit the iniquities." The Hebrew is avon avat. That's the concept. And so the early church fathers debated, as did the rabbis. What is it? You had some that said, no, that he doesn't do that anymore because he said, every soul is mine. Only one who sins shall die, right? A father shall not be punished for the crime of his children, nor a child for the father, right? So Augustine said, wait a minute. God says. Are you forgetting that God says? You know, and then he distinguishes between human law and divine law. In divine law, and when Moses says a child shall not be punished for the father, he's talking about communal laws at the time of the communal laws of the new people of Israel. So civil laws, so to speak, civil laws, liturgical laws, marital laws, these sort of things. And so he's giving on a human law that's unjust, that a child will be punished. But in God's law, Augustine says, and then Thomas fleshes it out early in his writings, in the sentences, and then later in the Summa, that God does, because he says the child, it goes back to the authority structure, which we don't like. We reject the authority structure. It's a modernist thing. Modernism rejects authority. That Thomas very clearly, in multiple places, says that God, in his justice, punishes the father. The effect of the sin is felt as a punishment in the children, as to reconcile, to make satisfaction for. And that's really the distinction. It's the punishment due to sin, the temporal punishment. And Thomas says, because the child is, as it were, he says, the property, part of the bodily goods of the father, that God can, not does, not always, not will, the child can suffer because of the sins of the father. And we know this.
All right, so
on a human level, we know this.
Certainly on a human level. Let's use the example of an alcoholic father.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of punishment is felt by the child? What is that? How does that
Let's say the
manifest?
alcoholic father is a truck driver. He's got a CDL. And he goes home from work, and on the way home, he's driving his big rig, and he decides to stop in at the Drop In and have a Boilermaker. And then he decides to have 2 or 3 and 6, and he sits there for several hours and really gets a heavy drink on. He starts driving home, he gets into a car wreck, and he commits vehicular homicide. So he now goes to jail. The cops don't say, hey, I got this guy. Go get his kids and put him in jail. He goes to jail. His wife doesn't go to jail. He goes to jail. His kids don't go to jail. But as a result, the effect of his sin. So as the Catechism says, there is a sin has a dual consequence. There's a spiritual and there's a temporal. So just in our own civil law, there are only him. There is a direct responsibility for that sin, and then but his children feel the effect.
So ripple effect.
So he no longer he loses his job, so he can't provide for his family, and he's no longer living at home, so they're not as protected. So if the
that's a very tangible, practical
right.
example. So how does it happen more with like a totally secret sin? You know, like something that's less. I mean, that's the most tangible example. Is the dad goes to jail.
That kind of gives you the principle. So the
right.
father,
that's the principle.
The father now no longer provides for and no longer can protect his children. Yeah. They live in the privation
yes.
of the protection that comes with blessing. So
gotcha.
A curse is, think of a curse not as this equal opposite force that's battling in the cosmos against blessing. A curse is to blessing as darkness is to light.
Okay, it's a privation.
It's a privation. Just as original sin isn't necessarily something that's generated and passed down a defect. And it's some of the schools of theology have said, yes, this is a defect that's passed down, but the defect also can be seen as a privation of what once originally was the good of man before the fall. And so the effect of the fall means that sin has a twofold effect, a spiritual and a temporal. And so the children no longer have the protection. And so when it comes to what we refer to a familial spirit or generational spirit, the big concept that falls under is what the theologians Augustine and Thomas would call inherited guilt. Does God punish sin in the children of the sins punish the father's sins in the children? And Thomas and Augustine both very clearly say absolutely, because he says, Thomas says there's the essential and the accidental punishment in his earlier writing. So essential is at the essence, your sin is yours. It's essentially yours. In your essence, you committed it. Your essence, you suffer it. But also accidentally as secondarily, because your children are part of your goods, part of your body even, they now can suffer accidentally. Later in his writings, he says that the sin, he distinguishes between penal and medicinal. He gets a little clearer in his thought in his later writings. Penal means you're punished for your sin, but part of the medicine is that God can. And Augustine even says he can, sometimes not as strict, not as severe, but God does at times still do this because he said he does. And it's part of and it isn't a cruelness. They both say this isn't because God is cruel and he gets angry and mad at us like the other false gods, Zeus or whatever. No, it's to purify us, to remove from us all the obstacles of union with him. That's why God allows us to suffer. So St. Bonaventure says, and I have this in this book and I'm putting in the next book, he gives 4 reasons that God allows the demon to afflict us: to educate us, to punish sin, to admonish the sinner, and let me see what the last one was. To educate, to punish, to admonish the sinner, and to glorify God. Okay, to bring glory to God. Why was this man born blind? Who sinned, him or his father? Neither. So that God would be glorified, right? So when we suffer, when we bear suffering, we glorify God. And so one of the reasons that God allows this to happen is to punish sin. Very clear. No, these are 3 doctors of the church that are essentially saying the same thing. And so the sins of the father, the iniquities that God says at Sinai when he gave the law, I will visit to those who hate me. And later he describes hating of course, right there, those who follow the gods of the nations, the foreign gods. Psalm 96:5 says the gods of the Gentiles are demons. So when you're making these bodily pacts, doing idol worship, other things, it's in human language, it shows that we hate God because I'm a jealous God, right? That's what he said, jealous. And the word jealousy is the jealousy of a husband, the love of a husband for his wife that demands fidelity. That's the essence of that word. It isn't an anthropomorphic projection.
Hey, thanks guys for checking out the Conor Gallagher Show. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, or comment, or whatever you got to do to support it. And I appreciate that very much. All right, so this generational spirits, it's really, so why do we even say generational spirits? Why don't we say generational punishment?
I don't know. That's a good question. It's really inherited guilt and what Thomas would call vicarious punishment. We believe in voluntary vicarious atonement, right? Saint Teresa Benedict of the Cross says that when someone participates in when they choose to unite their suffering with the suffering of Christ, she calls it voluntary vicarious atonement, right? Which is just a theological voluntary. I willfully offer reparation, as St. Paul says, I rejoice in my sufferings, for in my body I make up what's lacking in Christ's body. In Christ's suffering, which is Christ's body, the church, Colossians 1:24. So our suffering in union with the suffering of Christ makes satisfaction for sins. And all this whole theological concept says is when a father commits a sin, because it's centered on the authority structure, that God will allow evil spirits to afflict us. And it's very clear in our developed angelology as well. John Daniel Lew, I'm not sure if you published his book on angels, Angels and Their Missions. He talks about the fathers, Bonaventure, Thomas, they talk about how angels are the instruments of God's justice. They punish sin. Ambrose says that God, the angels are tasked by God to punish sin, and they would rather be in the beatific vision. It's hateful for them to have to punish our sin, but they do because that's part of their job, to punish sin, so that in punishing the sin, we make satisfaction, that temporal the reparation for the sin that keeps us from ultimately being united with God. God allows these evils to happen so that we become united with him, both us and the family.
All right. Does my sin as the father have greater generational impact on my children than my wife's sin because of my position?
Yeah. So the
I hope you say no, because that would really stink.
Well, yeah, I think
I would hate to be the primary cause of my children and grandchildren's problems.
Well, you're not the cause of their problems. I mean, at some point the children have free will. St. Thomas says that, yes, the father God does punish the sins. He does afflict the children to exact punishment to the father to make satisfaction. Yeah. He says, unless there's impediments. And they list off impediments as basic a life of virtue. If the children commits to a life of virtue,
here the virtue is the impediment.
The impediment blocks the effect of the father's sin by making satisfaction through virtue. So, but at the same token, that's a good question because if you are the head of household, your sins are going to be more impactful. Not your sins, but the effect of those sins.
Damn it.
Yeah, right? So we have to understand the great responsibility. That's why we define a munus, an office, as a responsibility.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Now, what about grace? So if I'm living a virtuous life, if I'm receiving grace, does that have a generational impact on my children and grandchildren?
Yeah, it does. Because again, the life of grace, the blessing, because really if you think about what God is saying here at Sinai, is that to those who love me, right? I will bless to the thousandth generation. Mm-hmm. And if by blessing we talk about the blessing that comes to authority of provision and protection, when we live a righteous life and we do our duty, we bestow blessings upon our family. It isn't that we bestow blessings, is that the byproduct of our righteous living carries down in the form of provision and protection for them. Now, God does honor our free will. He honors our free will. Okay. What was interesting, what really was a wrench in my head, when you just see the book, I cover all the exegetical portions. The hard part for me was two parts of the New Testament. I mean, seeing these things in the field, okay, I can tell you stories, some of the successes that we've had, but seeing in Scripture, Mark's gospel, the Syrophoenician woman whose daughter, she says, my little daughter is tormented by demons. And the only other time that, she doesn't say my daughter, it's my little daughter. And Jesus calls her, she says, it's not right to give to the little dogs the food of the children. So it's an interplay of words. Calls her a little dog, right? And who are the dogs but the Gentiles? And the gods of the Gentiles, Psalm 96:5, are demons. So he calls her a little dog, which is a very Jewish way, the goyim, the joim dogs, because for various reasons, dogs copulate indiscriminately, just like the ritualistic sex of the pagan religions that surrounded Israel. And so the only time that word is used is in Jairus' daughter in the same gospel, Mark, of all the New Testament, whose daughter was 12 years old. So arguably, she's 12 years old. So, okay, you could say he was just using a diminutive, my sweet little girl, she was. But then you get to Mark chapter 9, and Jesus comes down the Transfiguration. He walks down, there's a fight breaking out in the village, and he says, what's going on? And they said, a father says, my son is possessed by a demon, and your disciples couldn't drive him out. And so Jesus asked the father, how long has this been going on? And the father says in Greek, ex paidiothon. So from young childhood or infancy, Jerome translated in the Vulgate, ab infantia, since his infancy. How could that be? How could that be? Is it, you know what I mean? So that was really
he wouldn't have had personal sin, isn't it?
Or how could he have personal sin? So Julian of Eclanum, the Pelagian, was saying all sin is imitated, and we argued back, Augustine, that no, there is an original sin, and because there's original sin, it sets a pattern. That same double consequence of the Catechism, 1472, I believe, where it says that there's a spiritual and a temporal effect, and in that temporal effect, the fathers of the church are clear that the children can be punished. They can feel the effect of the sin, not the sin itself. It doesn't pass down because the parents didn't they didn't generate his soul, so they can't generate his sin. But at the same time, I think some of the bishop conferences are speaking out because you have an abuse of the liturgy. They're using the liturgy now to have intergenerational healing, and that's just devoid of any standing in tradition.
All right, so it's a good segue to get to Freemasonry, because when my friends, the people I know, talk about, again, I think we've used the term incorrectly, generational sin. When we talk about that, and there's a deliverance for the generational deliverance that people have prayed, very often it's tied to, hey, we're Americans.
In the South especially, or parts of the Midwest.
I mean, unless you have been Catholic all along on both sides of your family, chances are you got Mason blood in you. There's just no way around that. I mean, I do.
13 of the 30, how many signers of the Constitution? 36, 37? 13 were Freemasons, I think.
I don't doubt it, I think the vast majority of presidents have been. I think like probably 80% of our presidents have been.
Yeah, first let's say that there's been an unbranding, I forget how many, I think 30 or so, 33, something like that, 32 papal decrees denouncing Freemasonry and Catholicism. So this is incompatible with Catholicism for various reasons. But
so let's start broad and say, okay, explain what is wrong with Masonry. Why is this such a big deal, and why? And then work your way down to how does this factor into this generational spirit, right? Because people are praying to be delivered from different types of oppressions that occur, and they think that it's due to Masons in their lineage. Do you agree with that? Is that how it works?
Well,
do you have a problem with that based on this misunderstanding of generational sin?
Well, the sin isn't generated, but the effect of the sin is, and God allows us when if a spouse says, I'm done with you, and he runs off and has an affair with his secretary and lives a dissolute life, right? The spouse says, well, I guess go. I can't stop you. I honor your free will. I mean, I want you to stay. God's the same way. He honors our free will. So if we want to follow the gods of the nations, right? Then God allows that. But there is an effect. So if the guy makes a mistake, has an affair, he comes back, his wife hopefully forgives him, and that night he says, "Okay, honey." He starts to put his pajamas on and get into bed with her. What does she say? I don't think so, big guy. Yeah. I already set the couch up for you. There's going to be some reparation that needs to take place. There needs to be a time of proving, a time of penance, you know. And so these things are working. When we say generational, it isn't that it's generated. It's think familial, and the effect of the sin as allowed by God to pass because of the authority structure.
All right, so real specific question. The fact that I have Masons in my background, is that potentially a problem for me? Just to use it as a specific example.
Like St. Augustine says, sometimes, in some parents, and often, usually to a lesser degree, God does allow the effect of the sin to be felt in the children. So it isn't every time. It's in God's providence. Augustine is very clear, Thomas. It's in God's providence. You never know, because sometimes generations, nothing happens. And other
so
times,
what about these prayers about generational deliverance? Have you
right, like severing the Freemasonic curses?
Yes.
Right. Yeah. That's something that, again, we've seen it very effective.
Very effective.
You can't.
That's a positive.
It's a positive. Very effective. I'll give you an example. Recently, I get a call from a guy. They're running cases, or one of our teams, and they're running cases, and they get a case of what Freemasonry was involved, right? Remember, in Freemasonry, the motto is against cross and crown. It's at one level you actually stomp on a papal a crown, a papal tiara, symbolizing a rejection of Catholicism and of the authority of Catholicism. You know, it's a complete rejection of Catholicism. It's syncretistic. It uses elements of all sorts of religions in there, et cetera, going back to really digging into older medieval type witchcraft and other things.
Have you studied the history of Masonry?
Somewhat, yeah. I try not to study. I try to spend 99% of my time studying, reading about God. Yeah. And then once I get a good understanding here, when I go, it's like dollar bills. When they teach bank tellers how to, they never let their perfect little virginal fingers touch a fake bill, counterfeit bill. So when one comes across, it automatically feels different, And so I try to spend much more time studying about God and the good things in Scripture and tradition of the fathers. So, but let me finish this.
Sure.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
So this guy, they're running this person through the renunciations, and they go through 3 weeks, and then the wife, is also on the team. She says, I just remember my grandpa was a Freemason. He said, oh. The husband says, well, let's do it ourselves. So, okay. They happen to be working at the parish where the diocesan exorcist works. There were parishioners there. And they tell him, and he's like, yeah, sure, let's do it. So they go through the renunciations 3 times. And on the 3rd time, the wife goes in, and she has terrible arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis. And she walks with a cane. And so after the 3rd renunciation, the priest does severing prayers, and then she stands up, and she has this, and my friend calls me and he says, you're not going to believe it. She hands the cane to the priest. And this is not like some crazy, my rosary turned gold and it was silver. You know what I mean? They're not hoping for anything. They're just doing it because, oh yeah, I guess I probably should do these things too, Yeah. She hands the cane to the priest and says, I don't think I need this anymore. She walked out. And he said, Dan, you're not going to believe it. Every night for the next couple of weeks, I watch. If you've seen rheumatoid arthritis, it just curls. They start to bones start separating, the tendons that connect and ligaments and these things. I saw her fingers and her toes start to straighten every day, and she had less and less pain. 30 days, we had a follow up with our rheumatoid, the rheumatologist, who said, I have no idea what happened, but your rheumatoid arthritis is completely gone. There was 0 inflammation in your joints. I don't know what happened. So, and that doesn't happen every time. Yeah. Again, it's up to God. It's up to God what He wants to do.
Why is Masonry such a big deal? Like, why is this? Every time you talk to somebody about generational sin or spirits, probably Masonry comes up.
That seems to come up. Yeah.
I mean, so like what? And of course, people in our circles kind of enjoy talking about the conspiracy theories with the Freemasons and whatnot. What is so evil about Freemasonry for it to permeate so many different areas? You get into skull and crossbones, you get into so many things, Illuminati, now is like the big movement in Hollywood. It's somehow connected with Freemasonry. I don't pretend to know. What is the deal? Why is Freemasonry so prevalent in these spiritual warfare conversations?
Yeah, it sure seems to be, because we're starting to discover it, and it's just become more overt. So basically, you've got two levels. There's the saying that we use that the demon looks for the mouth that blesses and curses. So the inconsistencies, and so they'll recruit somebody and say, "You're a good guy. You're a man of upstanding character," and they'll draw you in, and they feel that they start to try to appeal to the need that we have for male fellowship, male bonding. This is why the Knights of Columbus was formed. It was to help counteract and fill that void in the church.
Yes.
That's why there's a lot of the rituals and other things. A Catholic version of it. So, and then they'll start to test you. And those guys that are willing to do certain things, that are willing to have an appearance on the outside of a good, upstanding guy, that are willing to negotiate contracts, business contracts, etc., with various immoral elements being invited into those contracts. I mean, to seal the deal, so to speak. Guys that are willing to bless and curse, that are willing to be one thing on the outside and another on the inside, those guys start to progress up. The good guys that are just there because they want the fellowship, they like the lodge and hanging out, they're not going to go to that level. Those guys that are passing the boot on the street. Those are the face of the charitable side of it. But deeper behind it, it starts to get darker and darker on who the great architect of the universe is. And so it's syncretistic, and at each level, when you make these promises, there's an exchange. Again, what does God say at Sinai? To those, I'm a jealous God. To those, and at Sinai, we discussed in our last interview that God wed himself. He wed himself with the people of Israel. So this nuptial marital bond with his people, that image, Christ the divine bridegroom, like a bridegroom rising from his tent, that we see in the Psalms. And so we when we make pacts with false gods, God says, "Okay, I'll let you live with the consequences of that." And so that effect can be felt in the form of temporal punishment.
I know a man who will remain nameless, but years ago, when I was just very young, he got very highly ranked in the Masonic temple, at least for a local guy. He kind of reached the top level he could on some kind of local level. Very good man, very devout Christian man, very gentle man. But then on the morning of his celebration party, I think it was the day after he was sworn in or did the ceremony, where they were going to have a party for the celebration. They couldn't find him. He never showed up to the event. Never showed up. And so everybody starts looking for him. And they find him dead in his trailer out in the woods where he committed suicide. And he dressed up in his full regalia and he committed suicide. Yeah. And because I knew this man, I kind of always wanted to believe, I don't know if that's the right word, wanted to believe, but there was something reassuring, I guess, that if this man found out something about the dark side of the Masonry, if he was promoted high enough to where he saw, oh my gosh, I've been involved in something perhaps demonic or something like that, then the remorse and guilt kind of drove him to this. I mean, not that, suicide's terrible under any circumstance, but I would think that really good people, once they go through those secret ceremonies at the highest level, sometimes their eyes may be open to what the hell have I been doing. Yeah. And so there is a little glimmer of hope that there was at least just this great remorse and regret that this had occurred. Tragedy ends in suicide, but I just can't help but wonder if that's a real coincidence or not, that he killed himself the day of a very high promotion within the Masons.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Let's move from Masons and go to, if I'm going to say it, Reiki.
Reiki, yeah.
Reiki, what is that?
It's a form of a bodily therapy that they use techniques. And so it'd be more kind of a cross between pressure point and massage, but they use other modalities. The danger of it just like others, is that they're invoking foreign entities. Whenever you hear about channeling chakras, right? The kind of way to discern different modalities is if it's invoking energy, they call it energy or other things. If it's invoking something exterior to the body, into the body, it's invoking something other than the true God. If it's drawing out of the body, it's natural healing, then it's just working with the body's own natural.
It's funny, a
construct.
buddy of mine he'd go to the chiropractor very regularly, and it's kind of a new thing for him, and they're doing a lot of like massaging on his head and neck, and it's just kind of stuff that he hadn't experienced before. And so he asked his priest, he's like, is there something I have to be worried about here? And the priest asked a very good question. He said, well, when he's talking, is he saying anything about energy or anything like that? He's like, no, we're just talking about football. He's like, well, then you're fine. But he was like looking to see, is there any kind of weird messaging going on here?
Right.
I think
And that's
looking for that. And I thought the priest kind of had his stuff together and asking that specific
That's
question.
a good question, yeah. So are they invoking things exterior,
Okay, so bringing things from the outside in, that's interesting.
Well, just remember that
it's like Chesterton said. The problem with what was it like? I don't want to have. I don't need to have an open mind. I need to have a mind that closes on something of substance.
Right.
So it's like opening yourself up to the universal life energy.
Yeah.
Is just a field day for demons.
Yeah. Well, remember too that the demon has no, vis-a-vis the baptized, he has no right to us. There's no right. By right, our soul, as baptized, belongs to God. By right.
And he can't come in unless invited in some way, right?
Right.
So that's
you can sneeze.
Dracula.
Yeah.
Like the whole story there, right?
Yeah.
So Joseph Pierce, good friend of mine and Tan's, he explains, Bram Stoker's Dracula. So when Dracula is at the door, he has to actually, and the character in the book, he's at the door and he actually cannot come in the house unless he's invited in.
Yeah.
And that's why it's kind of a Catholic novel in the sense of that's just one example of.
Right, and the way we would say it is, being invited in is a permission.
It's a permission.
So Dracula has no right to go into the house, but if the owner of the house says, "Come on in,"
right, that's the problem.
You're welcome in here.
Right,
you're welcome here. He has no right to that house, but he has a permission to be there, and that's when again Revelation 12. The devil accuses the brethren day and night before the Father. And what is he accusing of? All those things that when we permitted him, we gave him permission to us through our sin, notably through our sin.
So Reiki therapy is becoming, there's like a whole Christianized Reiki kind of thing, right? I mean, that's becoming a big thing, right?
Yeah.
What about yoga?
There's no such thing as Christianized. I mean,
I know, but that's what I think they call it that.
The same thing with yoga. It's again.
Okay, but I got a specific question about yoga. So there's been a lot of talk about this. So I hate to draw like really fine distinctions, okay? But let's just take P90X, Tony Horton, of all, he's got a dozen workouts or more, and one of them is the yoga thing, right? Now, as I look at it, you're stretching. You're not putting yourself in really strange positions that I see. You're just basically stretching and breathing. You're not meditating. You're just stretching and breathing. Help me understand where it crosses. Now, some people call that yoga. Help me understand, why can't I stretch and breathe?
Yeah, stretching and breathing.
Yeah, I mean, how do you know when it becomes quote unquote yoga and it's dangerous?
Yeah, it's kind of like the professional baseball player goes up to the plate and he does this, right?
Yeah,
makes the sound of the cross. Whether he intends it or not, that gesture has spiritual meaning, right? And so the bodily positions, the mantras, but specifically those bodily positions, cannot be separated from the spiritual meaning behind it.
And does it go back to Hinduism?
Yes, it goes back to Hinduism. So we've seen cases where one
which is a pagan religion.
Of course, it's pantheistic and pagan. So those you cannot separate those out. And I don't know anything about PX90, but
right.
That section I'd have to look at it. But in terms of yoga proper,
but I just think that sometimes the term has become very broad now.
Well, it has. Now it's like, you need the yoga, and they mean by yoga some meditation, breathing and meditation. There's nothing wrong with breathing and meditating,
right?
So we have to take back these terms and put them back in the glossary of the Catholic Church. Meditation, mental prayer. Part of your mental prayer should be to help, control your breathing. In prayer, utilizing the mind. This is purifying your memories, linking our thoughts and prayers through Lectio Divina. This is the way we deal with stress, and not jump into a yoga class. And there's just no way to Christianize it.
Right.
There's no way to Christianize it. So there's those that will say they do.
Maybe we shouldn't joke around the office, because usually someone, hey, can you be at a meeting at Wednesday at 10 o'clock? And we'll text back and say, sorry, I got my hot yoga class.
Right.
or my goat yoga class.
Right.
Should probably not joke about it, but that's usually our way of goofing off.
No, I get it.
So, all right, so yoga. Now, I'll tell you this. I know that yoga has even made its way into like middle school and high schools, Catholic high schools, even around here.
Catholic retreat centers and other places.
Where it's just like you got all these kids doing yoga. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Why are you introducing these
I always tell people, before you reject Western forms of prayer and embrace Eastern forms of prayer, and I mean by Eastern, I'm not talking about Eastern Orthodox. I'm talking about Eastern
this
Pagan.
This is not Byzantine divine.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the Jesus prayer or other things. I'm talking about embracing Eastern Pagan practices. Let's look at Saint Benedict and Lectio Divina. Look at Teresa of Avila. Look at John of the Cross. Therese, the little flower.
Mysticism, Christian mysticism.
Look at Christian prayer before you reject it. Give it a look, because most people think, I didn't know how to pray as a Catholic, so I find some peace over here.
Right. Is this where Thomas Merton went wrong?
I think that,
because some of this stuff is absolutely beautiful.
It's beautiful, yeah.
But then I guess he went haywire researching Eastern stuff.
Yeah, there was like even in Germany today, if you want to learn how to do yoga, many times you just go to any Benedictine monastery and one of the monks will teach you.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, I've read some of Merton's stuff. Some of his early stuff is fantastic. I was
warned about him. And then I read Seven Story Mountain, and I was like, "This is one of the most beautiful books I've read." Seriously,
yeah.
And
so there was a movement at that time to try to look at Eastern forms, and so they started doing Eastern bodily. They were getting rid of monasteries here in this country that I know of. There's one monastery I know in the 80s. There were two guys left in the 80s. Beautiful monastery. Two guys left, two monks, and they had the prayer pillows, and they were doing the Eastern prayer forms and poses, and they were trying to do Buddhistic type prayers. Remember, in Buddhism, the principle of life is suffering, so you transcend. Mm-hmm. You deal with suffering by transcending it through altered states of prayer. In the Catholic philosophy, it's, if you wish to be my disciple, pick up your cross daily and follow me. Deny yourself, pick up your cross and follow me daily. And so we look at it's, again, going back to that modernist rejection of the redemptive value of suffering. So it makes sense that Buddhism would be moving in, and yoga, Hindu type prayer, Buddhistic prayers, centering type prayers that are focused more on alleviating my suffering, giving me the emotional satisfaction than actually union with God. Nowhere in our tradition is our emotional state indicative of our standing before God. We have this feeling that God woos us. In our early stages of our conversion, oftentimes He'll give us tremendous graces to guide us where we need to be, and then He withdraws those graces, because that's part of spiritual maturity. And when He withdraws those graces, we oftentimes get thinking, God must hate me because I'm no longer getting these emotional feelings. And so I have to go to this church, and maybe the priest isn't anointed. Then I'm going to go to this prayer meeting and have them lay hands on me. And I'm just chasing the emotion and following the emotions that it gets. And when those emotions go away, my faith goes away. But God is actually closer then in our darkness. This is John of the Cross and the apophatic mysticism of the Carmelite order, that we find God in the darkness. Mm-hmm. That's where we truly find Him. And so we have to get rid of this seeking the emotional satisfaction through prayer. And that's what a lot of these things do. A lot of these other Eastern Oriental type forms.
Tattoos. Can my son and I go get badass
Right.
Benedict metal tattoos.
Right. No, I would not recommend it.
Dang it, why not?
Well,
And as a guy in the military, you must have gotten a tattoo in the military.
no, man.
Okay.
Also, I was an officer. Back in those days, I'm just kidding. Back in those days, it was officers didn't get tattoos. It was, my son and I were both, I trained him, and he's a fighter, and I was a fighter, and we always get together and watch classic fights. So this week, being here visiting, we've watched Salvador Sanchez, the great Mexican fighter, versus the great Puerto Rican fighter, Benito Gomez last night. Great fight. The night before we watched an old guy that his brother trained me, the first world champion from the Kronk gym in the early 80s. And we watch these old fights from the 70s and 80s and even some of the earlier ones, and there's not a single tattoo on these guys.
Yeah, now they're covered.
And now, oh my gosh, that's why one of the reasons MMA is even worse. These guys are covered head to toe. And
what is this about? I mean, I don't know if they just think they can get them removed, but they're covered. Sleeves
and face tattoos. Yeah. So yeah, it's become a cultural thing. But remember, biblically, I can tell you as a biblical scholar, tattoos were a mark of slavery in the Old Testament.
Take us down there. It's interesting.
Yeah. So it was a mark of being of a slave to be tattooed. And so. It was a mark of branding. We even know this in the gang culture. In the gang culture today, they still will tattoo a woman as a branding, as belonging to him, as belonging to the gang leader. So
were the Israelite slaves in Egypt tattooed by the Egyptians?
I would have to research it, but I would think so. I would have to research it.
And
I never thought about it. But it was tattooing was a pagan phenomenon. The people of God did not get tattoos. It was a pagan thing.
Yeah. All right, but okay, so that's how it was used in the past. But I mean, why does it make it? Is it intrinsically a problem?
Well, I think
foolish?
I think it's foolish, and I think people do it out of ignorance. Oftentimes, it marks you at a time of your life that you may not be there forever. Certain memories.
I don't understand. I don't usually like bringing up names, but given how so much good that. Father Mike has on the world, and then he goes and gets tattooed, and not just that, but on his wrist to where you can see it, in the elevation of the host.
I think I've read that he kind of regretted that.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
I mean, it wasn't even as a young man; it was just recently. And
I
don't understand what that was. I mean, he's such a good voice for the church, and I was just scratching my head, saying, "What are you trying to prove here?"
Yeah, I'm just telling you, in our experience, again, sometimes when you deal enough cases. And we have a protocol Father Ripperker has for decommissioning tattoos as well. I think it's on our webpage. But you'll see often, not always, but oftentimes, a tattoo will light up fire hot.
Are you serious?
When a priest prays over them, yeah.
So I've heard that there's sometimes whatever those primary sources are for the ink, that they're cursed. And so there's cursed ink is spreading throughout the industry.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. We've seen that. I've seen somebody sent me an image, somebody's tattoo had just swelled up. It was just disgusting. I was like, well, that's a good reminder of why I don't do that.
Dang it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, they're kind of cool. I kind of want one.
Yeah. No, so again, looking at it from the Old Testament, this was a mark of slavery. This was something the pagans did. It was something God forbade. And we come into the new dispensation, the Christian dispensation. I think that would carry. Really shouldn't do that. You can get them removed as well. I know people that have regretted it and they get them removed and they do it as penance. Same thing. I know people that have come and reversed their vasectomies and other things, even though maybe they're beyond childbearing years, but they do it out of they'll a period of abstinence and they'll reverse it just out of penance. The same thing you can eliminate it. So tattoos. Oftentimes, think about those tattoo guys. Would you want them over at your house on Thanksgiving?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You've paid someone to shed your blood. You've now made a blood contract with him.
Ooh.
Right.
Oh, that doesn't sound too good.
Yeah.
You just took it to another level.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh man.
And sometimes they embed sigils into those too.
Embed what?
Sigils are like...
Sigils?
Yeah.
What's a sigil?
I'm going to invoke another movie, okay?
All right, okay.
Apocalypse Now, there was a scene where...
You like the military movies.
Military movies, yeah. He's walking through a battlefield and there's the corpses of the enemy there. He's playing cards so when they come police up the dead bodies, we don't do it anymore. We were told we are not allowed to do that. But they used to do that. And that was the way of just putting fear, marking we did this. So if you want to know who took your friend's life, it was us. It was because the First Cavalry was on the back of that playing card. So a sigil is a mark that symbolizes a certain specific demon. It doesn't happen every time, but they sometimes they'll build these marks. We had a guy that had this massive manifestation in front of me at an intake, and every time he would manifest, he had gotten this tattoo on his just like sleeve of the Aztec god of war. And then after he got this tattoo, he went and, for whatever reason, decides to get a prostitute. And now, whenever he manifests, that whole left side of his body freezes up. And then he tried to commit suicide. He tried to cut himself and cut his wrist and kill himself. And so whenever he manifested, it was always that side of the body because he just marked his body with the symbol of the Aztec god of war. And remember, Psalm 96:5, the gods of the Gentiles are demons. So you're making a blood sacrifice in a way, offering that part of your body there. And so I think it's just safest. I don't want to be like a geek and a dork.
Right.
But I guess I'm a geek and a dork.
All right, that's okay.
Yeah. I'm proud.
All right.
To
My son Peter, who we had kicked around the idea of getting matching tattoos, not going to happen, buddy.
All right, Peter.
Not going to happen, buddy. Sorry, it's not going to happen. All right. All right, to just totally, I feel almost silly bringing this up, but given how many times this topic has come up in homeschooling groups, Harry Potter versus J.R.R. Tolkien. Yeah. Why is one okay and not the other?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to John Henry Weston at LifeSite News. Yeah. He said he has 3 topics that if they do an article on, they get vitriolic response.
Yeah, their comments on YouTube are going to go bonkers, but that's okay. Yeah. That's all right.
Talking about gay marriage, abortion, and number 3, so the gay issue of anything homosexual and gender-oriented, abortion, and then Harry Potter's the 3rd. Yeah. So it's crazy. I know people who have homeschool groups that are actually divided.
That's what I'm saying. They get really. It's like talking like vaccines or something with people.
It really is. You better not bringing it up. Just at a very simple kind of fatherly level, this is something that, to me, what then Cardinal Ratzinger, Benedict, wrote it, spoke out against it.
Against Harry Potter.
He did, and he called it the subtle seduction. That it has an allure and a subtle seduction. And I think what he meant by that was, here we are at an age, the age that Therese got her vocation, the age that children often get their vocation because, when you have kids, they see the world differently. They're pure. Yeah. And they're open. We're made, like St. Augustine said, our hearts are restless and they rest in thee, and their childlike simplicity is oriented toward God. They're profoundly pure up until, at this young age, at that age when they're most open to the other, to what they were created for, to God, the authentic. Society comes in with this parallel, anti-false, cotton candy spirituality that fills that void. And so rather than focusing on Christ and fostering that spiritual longing for God, this fills the gap. Like you and I can get hungry tonight and we can go pound cotton candy and fill our stomachs and not be hungry, but it's just not authentic. It's not real substance. It's not real food.
All right, so there's magic. There's magic in there. That's
right. So now remember, Father Amorth said there's no such thing as white magic and dark magic. So I've heard proponents say this is dark magic versus white magic. This is dark magic versus white magic, and so it's good versus evil, and that's not. What Father Moore says, there's no such thing as dark or white magic. It's all magic has recourse to Satan.
Okay, so
that's a huge difference between allegory.
Okay, so but what's Gandalf?
Gandalf is an allegorical for Christ. Right, Gandalf is an allegory. All of the Tolkien was written with allegorically for Christ. Same thing with C.S. Lewis. So there's a difference between writing allegorical literature for children and another one drawing from that same kind of genre, but having it totally different than its foundation. So you could sit down with Tolkien and show where he's written this as allegorical. So there was a subtle difference, and this is why he calls what then Cardinal Ratzinger said the subtle seduction. And I can just tell you personally, when I was like, okay, whatever. And there's a certain time in Harry Potter where he spoke what he called parcel tongue, right? This was snake language. And the first time you hear that coming out of a human being's voice, which is exactly like it was, the Harry Potter voice on the movies and the books, the first time you hear that, yeah, I'm not a fan anymore. First time you hear
so
a
you're
demon
saying,
speaking.
so just to be clear, in the movies and in the book, they have a snake voice.
Yeah, there's
that,
one
that Harry Potter speak.
Yeah, Harry Potter. They have these different houses, and there's this one certain house that's named after the snake or Slytherin or whatever, and
which is always an imagery for evil.
Yeah, it's always going back.
So why
again.
would she be doing that? And in fact, I think in Lord of the Rings, the bad guys, like Snake Tongue is one of the, I forget the character's name, but it means snake tongue. And so that's always the bad guy.
Yeah.
And so to take that and make that the good guy.
And the rebellion, not to mention the good guys in the Christian literature are honorable and good. In Harry Potter, it's rebellion against family. It's rebellion against authority. So there's a lot of subtleties there that I wouldn't recommend.
Wow. Okay.
Again,
something I want to dive into much deeper one day and get some kind of expert on these two pieces of literature and just really dive into it, because the wars that these.
I know it's very unfortunate, but I try to stay away from
all the
it.
things that you can read. Why parents are spending months reading this to their children, and they just love it. They just love it, and I don't get it. I just don't get it. It's given everything else that's out there.
Yeah.
But there's a whole genre of fantasy novels now that Tolkien made it famous, but then just the amount of derivatives from this is substantial. And I have no way of knowing what's good or bad. I mean, there's whole magic systems now.
Yeah, now you can get the Harry Potter spell book. You can get
yeah, that's messed up.
Yeah.
I mean, that should tell you something right there.
Yeah, that'll tell you something right there. There's no such thing as the
Gandalf spell book.
Gandalf spell book, Lord of the Rings spell book.
Of course, if the Tolkien estate could do that to make money, they might do it.
Oh, for sure.
They're getting further and further away from Tolkien himself. Ouija boards. I go into Barnes & Noble, which of course is struggling and probably will close down just like Borders did a number of years ago. But you go into Barnes & Noble and, they can't sell books because people walk around, look at books, and they buy them on Amazon on their phone right then, and they have them at their house by the time they get home.
Right.
So all of downstairs is journals and games. Board games are huge, but every single Barnes & Noble in the country sells Ouija boards now. It's unbelievable. Talk to us about Ouija boards, and then have you seen that and tarot cards and other kind of, I guess you'd call them mediums, where, these people are really playing with fire.
Yeah, no.
In a much more direct way than just like a tattoo.
Right, yeah,
I would think.
It's a much more direct conjuring or an invocation. This is in the book I mentioned, the interactive diabolic activity. There's usually some kind of bodily element to it, an invocation, vocalization, but for example, the Ouija board, what is making this move? What are you invoking? So anytime you invoke anything other than the true and living God outside into your environment, into your area, you're invoking another entity. And so that you need to stay away from that stuff.
Yeah. All right.
So we've already talked about yoga, tattoos,
right.
Harry Potter,
all that stuff.
All the stuff, yeah. And
I just kind of wanted to throw all that in there. It's it's all this kind of modern culture kind of just playing with the spiritual world,
Yeah, and again, we've lost the idea of what it means to be Catholic, you know. We've lost that idea. And one of the analogies, I like, Jesse Romero, my friend, he and I have the Q&A book coming out together with 10 books.
Yep.
He uses the analogy, I think it's brilliant. He said, hey, I want to share my grandma's brownies with you. And this is an ancient recipe from my family. My grandma has it. I'm going to make some for you. But there's a secret ingredient I want to share with you that I haven't told anybody what the ingredient is. Yeah, sure. I heard they're good. Yeah, they're fantastic. My grandma would always take a little bit of dog poop and put them in the brownies. But hey, you want to try them? They're great. There's just a little bit. You can't taste it. You can't taste it at all. Would you eat that brownie? So really, if you want a working definition of Catholic discernment is knowing clean from unclean. And we're living immersed in this culture that is very anti-Catholic. It's very atheistic. It's really pagan. And so we have to start, that dollar bill, the teaching our children, like they teach bank tellers, not to be able to tell how to tell the difference between an authentic bill and a false bill. Authentic spirituality, false spirituality. The clean from the unclean. Clean from unclean thinking, clean from unclean sexuality, clean from unclean speech, clean from unclean diet, clean from unclean worship. That's really what separates us. That is Catholic discernment.
The Jewish people were, cleanliness was, their hygiene was the best the world's ever seen.
Yeah.
They were such a clean people. So much so that it maybe went too far and it became incestuous in a lot of ways, but they were, they really, I read a book on the dietary restraints of the Jewish people, and I always thought that it was just kind of random things, like you couldn't eat, this kind of beast or that kind of beast. But then when you see the inner logic of the hygiene, like for example, they don't eat shrimp, they don't eat shelled fish. Well, those are the vacuum cleaners of the bottom of the ocean. They're eating all the crap at the bottom. Those are dirty animals.
Now you're going to get all the people in Louisiana mad at us.
I know. But the reason they don't eat, the reason they might not eat a pig is because they're the ones that they're like vultures. They're just eating all this nasty, defiled things, and they process that food so quickly. So a pig can eat a carcass. You kill the pig, and you eat, and you're actually eating the carcass along with the pig. Within a very short period of time. So the Jews had this really deep understanding of hygiene and cleanliness.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that they were able to withstand a lot of the plagues and stuff that were going around is they literally created, outhouses outside their camp, where other ancient world didn't do that. Like if you had to go do your business, you had to walk outside the camp. You had to wash your hands. You had to wash your feet. All of those things, it really showed a sense of cleanliness.
I have a friend, retired now, Green Beret, Special Forces guy. I forget where he went, somewhere in the East. I don't know if it's the Philippines or somewhere. They were fighting Al Qaeda, and he was training. The Green Berets, they train local guys. They train the local chieftains how to fight, and they organize. And so, I said, "What was your first tour like?" This is back in the early part of the war against terror. He said, "All I did was teach them field sanitation.
Wow. Don't
go to the bathroom in the same river that you drink from." It was frustrating. So we still do this. So the dietary and these things. So we need to know clean from unclean drinking water, but spiritually, we have to learn clean from unclean. What is clean prayer? What is unclean prayer? What is clean worship? What is clean liturgy? What is clean speech? Clean thoughts? Holiness in thought, word, and deed. That's what really separates us. Yeah. That's what really gives us that separation from the enemy who's constantly pursuing. What gives him access to us is those areas of our lives, any area of our life that is inconsistent with the indelible mark of baptism, that attracts the demon to us. So we have to we have to be solid, clean, like I say, be hard to kill.
Tan Books is here to help you become a saint. That's why we do everything we do. We publish thousands of titles, literally, that are specifically written to help you get to heaven. Everything from the lives of the saints to the writings of the saints, the greatest doctors of the church, the great spiritual masters, Alphonsus Liguori, St. Francis de Sales, and so on. So please come to tanbooks.com and find the book that God wants you to have right now so that you can get to heaven and be a saint for eternity.
I want to talk now about the transgender movement, but first I thought a way to introduce this is share with you just a working theory I have on something, and I could be completely wrong, so don't feel ashamed to say, no, Conor, you're totally wrong.
You're a man, Conor.
Okay. Yeah, I know that.
Okay.
That's not what I'm looking for. All right, so it has always interested me why the Catholic priesthood really has struggled historically with homosexuality. And I don't think it's just because of the practice of celibacy. I don't think that's the problem. I think there's a theological root to this. So here's the theory. The devil and the angels fell, the church fathers talk about, possibly because of their revulsion to the incarnation.
Right.
The idea of bowing before flesh and blood, that nasty bodily creature that snivels and snorts and goes to the bathroom and bleeds and dies. The idea of having to bow before that in regards to Christ and his mother was just unbearable. So they would rather, reign in hell than bow before the incarnation. Now, so enter the priesthood, which is persona Christi. It's the closest thing that this physical world has to Christ. And so what's he going to do with that priesthood? He could tempt the priesthood with any sin that he wants to. So he tempts it with the sin of homosexuality, because homosexuality, by its nature, is the most corrupt, the most backwards of all activities
it's
that
one of
man
the sins
can
that cry
be.
out to God for justice.
Cries out to God.
Yeah.
And so he wants people, I think a lot of people think that the devil loves the flesh. That's why we have so much lust and everything. But he hates the flesh. So he wants the priesthood to look as foul as possible so he can look at his demons and the rest of the world and say, see, I told you we should not embrace the incarnation. That's the incarnation right there. And I think that's why he has plagued the priesthood with an attraction to homosexuality through the ages. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, for sure. The two things that come to mind. One is St. Peter Damian. He's got a book. What's called the
Book of Gomorrah.
Book of Gomorrah.
Yeah,
brutal.
It's brutal, man.
Yeah.
I read that on an airplane one time and realized,
Yeah.
I hope this person on my right and left is not looking at this page.
Yeah.
Because the stuff that's in that book is unbelievable.
Yeah. And Alphonsus Liguori has a sermon called "The Four Gates of Hell." The Hell's Widest Gate. The Hell's Widest Gate. I think it's under the topics of the four gates or something. But Hell's Widest Gate he calls impurity. And he said there's some sins. Remember in the last we talked about generational spirits. You have inherited guilt that God uses angels, fallen and glorified, to punish sin. And he said that some sexual sins are so vile. Alphonsus Liguori says that even the demons who came from such a high exalted place are disgusted.
They have to look away.
They have to look away because they can't stand. It's even to them repulsive for them to being forced by God to tempt us to that.
Yeah.
And so, and I think it goes back to me to the very beginning. St. Augustine says that man is capax Dei. Inasmuch as in the mind we image God, we are capable. Capax, capable. It doesn't mean capable. It means possible, able to inherit God. And so when God made man male and female, He made them. Something about the diversity and complementarity of man and woman reflects the inner life of God. Let us make man in our image. Male and female, let us make them, right? So something of the inner nature of the triune God is there in the complementarity of man and woman. And so anything that the demon can do to distort that, because it's in that authentic humanity that we fully reflect God and are capable, are inheritors, are children of God.
Transgenderism is not new, right? They had cross-dressers back in ancient Egypt, I think.
Yeah. No, for sure. You had mentioned the groves. We can get into that, but going back to Numbers 1:11, and Numbers 1:11, they build the cities of Pithom and Ramses and Pithom. These were cities dedicated to a certain deity named Atun. This god was the god of the great bisexual god. He was the great the great he/she, they called him. So this was a deity that mocked God who created. Instead of God speaking and creating, I'm not going to describe how he generates, but he generates out of his own body his bisexual nature, his bisexual transgender body.
Okay, even if you don't say it, how would you have known it? Is that in Scripture?
It's not in Scripture.
How would you know how he generates?
And
like, what tradition does that come from? You know, there's some kind of oral tradition that passes that down.
These are scholars. There's a book called Dictionary of Deities and Demons in the Bible. So these are scholarly works that examine that. This would be socio-historical research on what these gods, what they represented. There were three principal deities.
So they've done historical research.
Yeah.
And the writings of the time outside of Scripture would have described this. But he makes an appearance in Scripture.
Yeah. And these different deities, pagan deities, take different forms, but they're very similar, and they might change faces a little bit, different cultures, you know. So like even the stuff you deal with in the South versus the Midwest versus, you know, down in the Southwest, you have a lot of influx from Mexico, so you have that kind of you know, witchcraft, versus Louisiana's got their own unique type of stuff from the island influence. Midwest, you might have Reiki and yoga and kind of a New Age influence. So the cultures all kind of deal with the same struggles, right? Or the same temptations.
Thing happened in the ancient
world. They kind of they would repurpose themselves in the pantheon. So you basically had three overarching deities. You had Astarte, Shamash, and Moloch. And these were the three big ones that Israel constantly struggled with. Astarte was...
what's that word, Astarte?
Ishtar,
okay.
Ishtar or Astarte. We hear about groves, sacred poles and groves, you know, burning incense to the Queen of Heaven. Ezekiel decries the Israelites for falling into false worship. This would be a god, remember 96:5, Psalm 96:5, the gods of the Gentiles are demons. This would be a deity that they would sacrifice to for fertility, good crops, fertility, personal sexual fertility, etc. The second Shamash would be the god for success in war, and then the third Moloch, they would do more human sacrifice.
Yeah, I was about to say, isn't that the child sacrifice?
Child sacrifice, human sacrifice. When they would do other...
Where did he make his appearance? Is that in the Aztec culture, or where was he?
Well, long before that.
Okay.
Yeah. Egypt and the land of Canaan. He was one of the
Canaan,
one of the principal gods there as well. And again, they take different forms in different places. But early on, we see this one particular Egyptian deity where the Israelites eventually became enslaved. Was the great he, she, the great bisexual, the god Atun, the demon god Atun. And later, because you have this throwaway in Deuteronomy, I think 33, it says, a man shall not dress like a woman, nor a woman like a man. You know,
cross-dressing.
Cross-dressing, yeah. We see this from the beginning because this was part of various pagan rituals that they did. I mean, the Dionysian ritual. We were all shocked. And we looked at the
Olympics.
The Olympics. We're like, this is a mockery of the Last Supper, you know. And Christians were rightly indignant about that. But it was more than just this was more than a mockery of the Last Supper. This was a Dionysian rite. Dionysian.
Explain that. We hear that all the time.
Yeah, we know him.
When I hear of pseudo Dionysius, I think of like
Dionysius the
philosopher.
Areopagite.
Right.
Thomas quotes the Dionysius or pseudo Dionysius.
Right.
Now this was an ancient deity that took
Greece.
In ancient Greece.
The Dionysian, what were they called? The Dionysian rites.
Right. And you get the word.
I think that makes appearance even in some of Plato's writings and Aristotle.
Right, and so this would be.
It's like Greek versions of Druids in Ireland.
Yeah, because it was largely female. It was started with female. It was oriented with females first, and so this was a way for. And remember, there was a difference in Greek culture towards women and the Romans, and you can read this in Livy. The Roman historian Livy in the first century writes a detailed letter to the Senate saying why we cannot let this cult, right, this type of worship into Rome.
Yes.
And he describes in detail some of the stuff that they do, these Dionysian rituals. So what it started was women, a woman in Greek side never really left. Very little did she leave the home, you know, and so this became something that was seen as liberating. You get the word the maenads, you know, or the word maniac. They would go out and just wine and drug-fueled
Orgies.
frenzies. At first, it was just frenzies, maybe orgies, but it was all women. And then the men said, "We want to be a part of this. It looks pretty fun, right? Orgies with women, right?" Anyway, so and that's when they said, "Okay." So all the priestesses, it became more ritualistic. The women were priests, and then for men to enter in, there were certain rituals they had to agree to. And that were cross-dressing and bisexual and other things, and if they didn't, it didn't work out well for them. And so this became
What does that mean? Did not work out well for them. What do you mean? Okay, but maybe you don't want to go there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Livy describes it.
Okay.
Yeah, they were taken into a cave and sacrificed.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And cannibalized.
That does not work out well for them.
It does not work out. That is my definition. Not working.
This is
out
the
well.
men are getting cannibalized.
Yeah.
So the women got what they want.
Yeah. So this really bizarre. So
it does sound like the feminist movement.
Well, an extreme,
I'm sorry. Kill all the men.
Yeah.
And then eat them.
So maybe we should edit this one out. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
They do seem that angry sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. Keep going.
So this ritual you see in the Olympics, this was what.
Right, because I just saw the Last Supper. So I've heard it's the Dionysian ritual. What's Dionysian about it? I mean, I'm looking at, is it just the cross-dressers? I mean,
Well, yeah, they were cross-dressers. To enter into this ritual, you have to cross-dress, bisexual. I don't want to really get into the details of what they do, but yeah. And if you didn't agree to these things, you want to be in a women's group, you got to be like a woman. Mm-hmm. And this is part of the rituals of the Bohemian Groves today. Very similar.
Bohemian Grove, that makes a lot of press.
It does.
Right? Because
they have their own private security. It's federal land. No law enforcement can go on there. It's really interesting, ancient-owned, ancient space.
And there's pictures. There's some kind of big altar. There's a massive altar.
Yeah.
It looks like they burned things on there or something.
Yeah.
But
well, Epstein's Island they did similar things too.
Really? Yeah, so I mean, there's been some good eyewitness testimony where people have been invited somehow into this Bohemian Grove, and then they come out and I think they said, I have seen child sacrifice. I mean, that's the allegation. So, I mean, that's just hard to believe, and it seems to be an elitist group of Hollywood stars or power brokers that are participating in this. I mean, and yet every single year, I guess it is, there's some
these rituals. Yeah, usually we fight an ancient enemy. You read Livy. He's writing around 100 BC. In the book of Maccabees, those who refuse to conform to and get branded, do the wreath and do the ceremony among the Jews, they were stripped of their properties and they were branded and stripped of their rights as citizens. I mean, this was part of the again, the Greeks in particular, we see it in the book of Maccabees as well. And again, Livy describes it and tries to convince them. This is where we get the god Bacchus. They're like, he basically said, we want to make sure we don't make this god angry, but maybe we can kind of take some of the other elements out of it, and this is where you get this god of wine.
Back to the Bohemian Grove. Did you know that the percentage of middle school young teenage children that go missing is the highest in the surrounding area around Bohemian Grove?
Wow. Yeah.
The children go missing. Where are they going?
Yeah.
You know? So we need to do an episode sometime, just like find some world expert on what's going on there, because there is something evil and dark going on. And so people have come out and said they never imagined seeing something as bad as this. And yet the Hollywood elites and the power brokers end up there every year. So there's something very dark. And it's but should we really be that surprised when our culture has just completely accepted wholesale the transgender movement, which is so, I guess, it's the most distorting thing, for identity. Have you noticed in your work, whether transgenders or people who've participated in that in some way, are they just more susceptible to demonic influence, and are these people needing more liberation?
There's always seems to be, there's certain marks of, affliction. Like Father Ripper says, one mortal sin is sufficient. for possession, but God is so merciful, normally it doesn't happen. It's normally a repeated depravity, but there's often witchcraft involved of some kind, and often there's some sexual deviancy in their past, sexual abuse, and other deviant sexual behavior. Yeah. So again, knowing clean from unclean sex is very important for us as Catholics, you know.
I mean, where do you think this is going in the transgender movement? I mean, has it kind of peaked, and is it going to start coming down? Are people sick of this? You know, the reaction to the Bud Light, you know, advertisements. Yeah. I mean, just culturally, how much further can they go? I mean, is just straight up child abuse or pedophilia, is that the next domino to fall? I mean, is that where we've accepted gay marriage, we've accepted transgenderism, and is the next thing to go just, hey, pedophilia is a beautiful thing and it's for some people, and culture just ends up accepting that? I know that some higher up Ivy League professors have said, don't even call it pedophilia, you call it, you know, something else, you know, because they're trying to loosen our revulsion to it. So, I mean, do you think that?
Yeah, I've read that article. It's fascinating. Yeah. That people. This is a Harvard professor, tenured, I think, professor. It's fascinating that they would have these types of thoughts unless there's something else driving it behind the scenes. You know.
I mean, how much further can we go as a society of accepting the vulgar?
Yeah, I think you know, I'm not a political scientist, so I hate to weigh into the topic, but I mean, it does seem that this issue is one of the issues that turned this country out to vote and say, hey, we've had enough of this. And now you've got, you know, Trump said in his inauguration speech, we're going to define, and the federal government's going to define there are two genders. Imagine we're living in an age.
Do we have to do that?
Right.
An executive order?
Right. You have to do an executive order that says there's only two genders. I mean, that's absurd. Like J.D. Vance, when he was interviewed by, I forget what liberal, you know, news host said, and she was saying, Trump is saying that Colorado City is being overrun by these Venezuelan gangs, and that's hyperbole. You know, it wasn't. They haven't overrun the city. There was only a few apartment complexes that have taken control over. They haven't overrun the city. That was hyperbole. And J.D. Vance said, "Do you hear yourself? Right. You know, only a few apartment complexes taken over by Argentinian gangs. You know, do you hear what you're saying in America that we're allowing, you know, this to happen?" So the evil militates to absurdity, and at some point, even, you know, we're dealing with individuals. The individuals say, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'll do that, but I won't do this. The demon will drive them to just absurdity, and until they convert, and because he cannot stop that bloodlust, just to completely distort that image and likeness of God. And so culturally, I think we're seeing that. We're seeing, I mean, the pictures of these transgender, transvestite
I was about to say
drag queens,
the drag queens
queen thing.
Going to libraries and stuff. When you look at these people, it's not a man just trying to look like a pretty woman.
Yeah.
There's almost something demonic in the way they want to look.
Yeah,
they're trying to be as extreme, and, you know, the way they do their hair and their makeup. And I mean, it's not a man trying to look like a woman. It's trying to look like some third type of creature,
human.
A distorted human.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very much so. So there's something dark in this whole movement, and the devil loves it. And so it just seems to me that, you know, with I would think exorcists are finding that this is a major gateway for the demonic.
Yeah, for sure. And it's very difficult. It's a very entrenched, because of the, you know, it's not like you're just going to just knock this one out. This, you know, there's work involved, and part of the problem is the distortion at the psychological distortion it takes to get there. There's so much enmeshment, so much symbiosis with the demon psychologically. It's very difficult to unravel that psychologically, so that you can get a full, healthy-ish humanity for grace to work with. So when there's this deep psychological enmeshment, and we know this is, you know, we watch Cops or whatever, you know, remember the show Cops? Yeah. And the police shows up at a house for domestic violence, and by the time the cop gets there, the house is a mess. Her hair's all this way. She's got a big shiner. His shirt's ripped up. He's got his wife beater t-shirt on, but it's ripped, and everything's calm. And obviously, was just a bad scene 20 minutes prior. And so they come, they interview him, they start to take the guy away, and what does inevitably the woman say? Don't take him away, I love him, he's my baby daddy, don't take him away, it was my fault, right? And so she's not ready. She has to get to that point to say, but there's a symbiotic relationship, there's a psychological compatibility that allows her, that allows him to do the abuse and him to abuse her. What's happening in the physical realm is happening in the spiritual realm, manipulating these things. So what we see this is kind of an analogy of being what's happening spiritually. And so if we see this happening in a family or in a home, this also happens culturally. So those demons that are working these things are constantly whittling away at identity, going back to that initial, let us make man in our image and likeness. Now we lost the likeness through original sin. We're still in God's image. That likeness is restored through baptism, and so he militates particularly against Christians who have the image and likeness of God. And part of that is our engendered identity. And so when somebody is wounded so deeply that they embrace a transgender identity, it's very difficult to unravel that.
All right, so historically, transgenderism was listed in the medical manuals
in our lifetimes
as a psychological disorder,
right.
And they changed it. So in deliverance ministry, there's a fine line, I guess, between mental illness and possession. Or I would suspect. So there's just no way as many people today who are transgender are all mentally ill, right? I mean, it seems like they're playing games, or they're just looking for attention, or there's demonic, but I don't think that many people are born with that kind of mental illness.
Right, yeah, no, you're right. I think it takes some work to get there.
It's contagious. I mean, I think it seems to be contagious in our world. And you get these kids, if I go through the coffee shop and I see these people making my coffee, and I don't know if it's a man or a woman.
Yeah. No, we're living, again, just as the demon militates to absurdity, and the woman has to recognize someday, I got to get rid of this guy. I got to be the one to get rid of him. I have to be ready for him to go. Culturally, I think we're seeing some movements. There's signs of hope in our own culture that we're starting to see some of these types of agendas start to get shut down. In the last 4 years, it's just been whatever, just all kind of crazy stuff pushed at us. Yeah. But I think we're seeing enough pushback that they realize, the devil and those that are working knowingly or unknowingly realize, we pushed that one too hard.
What's going on in the church with certain churchmen, supporting the LGBT community? I mean, they're trying to kind of force this on us and act like they're victims. I mean, to create communities for them to feel safe and to welcome them as if they're Christ. Like, that's all nice words, but isn't it just feeding the illness? I mean, isn't that just making it worse for them? I mean, how is the church supposed to handle this kind of situation? Because you always have to have charity, but it seems like they're enabling them in a really serious way. I mean, there's certain priests and bishops who are all into this, and there's no way that they're bringing people out of this disorder, but they're enabling them to continue on. That's my perception.
Yeah, going back again, I'm a patristics guy. St. Irenaeus, doctor of the church, 2nd century, one generation removed from the Apostle John. He used this phrase, condescension or condescensio, but the Greek is sun katabatis and anabasis, okay? Condescensio, to go down with, okay? So God, in his sacred humanity, enters into human nature. He lowers himself to where we are, but there is also an anabasis, of raising us up to where he is. So God lowered himself. The ultimate condescension is God becoming man, taking on human flesh, learning to walk, learning to talk. I mean, taking on our flesh, like us and always accept sin. But then he doesn't enter into where we are. He goes to where we are, but to raise us up to where he is. Mm-hmm. And the breakdown oftentimes we see is our understanding of what the word pastoral means. Pastoral means, in today's world, pastoral means being nice, whatever you think is best for this situation, being kind to them, don't hurt their feelings. But a generation ago, the word pastoral meant the administration of the sacraments. So to be pastoral, the munus liturgicam, was also the munus sanctificandi. So the duty, the obligation to sanctify. This was the administration of the sacraments. This is the pastoral work of the priests and bishops. And so sometimes, again, they often get too caught up in trying to not offend and not state the obvious, that certain things are sinful. There is objective right and wrong. And it doesn't mean that you condemn them. You offer them the grace to come out, the grace of healing that only we know the fullness comes through Jesus Christ and the sacraments.
Turning now to, I think one of your favorite topics, I think this is fair to say, is Our Lady's role in exorcism and deliverance ministry. Or you've even thought about working on a book on this topic for us. But just to kind of round out all of these conversations we've had, let's just, and there's been a lot of weird and kind of dark topics, in the last hour and a half. Everything from tarot cards.
And I really don't like about talking about these. And I tell people, if you ever hear me talking so much about the devil and not enough about Jesus Christ, you need to call me up and say, hey, man, you're getting focused too much in on, we got to stay focused on Christ.
Well, that's why I saved this for last, but Our Lady's role, you told me one time over lunch a couple years ago that, when you experience somebody, a victim, and they have some kind of demonic activity going on in their lives, one commonality that you guys have diagnosed is that there's a deep misunderstanding of a Marian dogma.
Or rejection, outright rejection.
That's an incredible discovery. So just take us down the road of Mary's role in all of this stuff.
Yeah, so it isn't, again, this modern perception, or, maybe because we live in a wash in Protestant thinking and the Protestant world, that we've added all this stuff to all this devotional stuff and all this Marian stuff that really wasn't part of the basic gospel. But we see from the very beginning in Genesis 3:15, after the fall of Adam and Eve, that God says in the Proto-Evangelion, the first gospel, that I will put enmity between you and the woman, between you and her seed. So you have a woman and a seed of a woman, which is interesting, right? Perhaps pointing to the virginal birth. You will strike at her heel, right? And then you've got three.
She will strike at your head.
She, right. Jerome translates it she. The Greek Septuagint says he.
Yes.
Auton, very clearly. The Hebrew is he, she, they. It's vague, pointing to the mystery of the woman who would be with the Redeemer, that she would be with the Redeemer. And so this woman, and she'll resurface, John is going to give her, we really see two elements of Mariology. This is a teaser on the Marian book. This is the book that I really want to write.
That's what I'm saying.
You know what I mean? I got to get these other ones done. This is the book I want to write, that I'm looking forward to. Because St. Alphonsus Liguori says, he asks, why do we offer Mary hyperdulia? Okay, this is 10 books, The Glories of Mary. 10 books, all right? I want to plug it.
Yeah.
It's a great book. It needs to be on every Catholic bookshelf. 10 books, The Glories of Mary, and 10 books,
True Devotion
to Mary. Yeah. The Secrets of the Rosary is another one. These are classics that we need to rediscover the classics, because and the saints that defeated the enemy, especially those Marian saints, I think, are even Alphonsus. St. Louis de Montfort talks about that God's going to raise up Marian saints in the latter age, and I think we're in this age. So Alphonsus Liguori asks, why do we give her hyperdulia? Now, St. Augustine, early 4th, 5th century, says we distinguish between dulia and latria. Latria is worship due to God alone.
Yep.
Dulia is honor.
What we give to saints.
Right. We give the saints. You clerk for a judge. Judge walks in the room, and the bailiff says, "All rise." Right, and everybody stands. It isn't because he's better than us. It isn't because he's prettier than us, smarter than us. It's because he has the office of judge. Because you recognize a human excellence, right? And you give honor to him. Medal of Honor. Medal of Honor winner, private first class, wins the Medal of Honor. He walks to the President. The President of the United States salutes him because of the human merit of winning a Medal of Honor. So the highest salutes the lowest, but the medal, the human excellence, that's dulia. Latria is worship due to God. So some human excellence. Latria is worship due to God because of divine excellence, of who he is. When we talk about doxology, the glory of God, the attributes of God going forth, right, echoing out into the world, the glories and beauties of God. The hyperdulia is what the church offers the Blessed Mother. One of the last canons of canon law, talks about that every Catholic should have a filial devotion to the Blessed Mother. Filial devotion. We're commanded by canon law to have a filial devotion, not an intellectual understanding, a filial devotion. And so Alphonsus says, why do we give her hyperdulia? Why do we give her not worship that's due to God alone, but why do we offer her more than the saints?
Like super honor.
Super honor, right, as it would be a literal translation. And he says it's for two reasons. One, because she's the Immaculate Conception. She was conceived without sin. And one is because she's the Mother of God. So those are the two base reasons. And we see in John's Gospel, we see this woman predicted to be with the Redeemer. We see her surface in the symbolic words, or the words interchange between Jesus and his mother at the wedding feast of Cana, and then the foot of the cross, and then Revelation 11:19, and then chapter 12. So we see her presented as the new Eve, or second Eve. Saint John Henry Newman, this was the final piece that brought him into Catholicism, was understanding that her ancient oldest title describing the person and office of Mary is New Eve. But then we also have the second element of her as the Immaculate Conception. And so this is, we see in the new Ark of the Covenant. We see this in Luke's theology of her being presented, the angels, the joyful mysteries, and the various elements there, and other elements that point her to the Ark of the New Covenant. So Newman had mentioned this phrase, the person and office of Mary. The person tells us who she is. Those we see in her dogmas, the 4 dogmas. The office tells us what she does from heaven. And that's seen in the 5th doctrine of Mary, co-redemptrix, mediatrix, advocate, queen of heaven and earth. So in that queenship, she acts in a unique way, as the medieval theologian Suarez says, she has an intrinsic relationship to the Blessed Trinity. Intrinsic relationship. Daughter of the Father, mother to the Redeemer, spouse of the Holy Spirit. And that tells us what she does from heaven. She pleads for us. She intercedes for us. She co-redeems. Co means with, not equal, okay? From the beginning, a woman would be with the Redeemer. He, she, they. We're not sure. Him, her, they. With the Redeemer to crush the head of Satan. It doesn't say that she would crush as grind down in the Latin. Conteret is the Latin. It's just grind down. To thoroughly defeat. And the dogmas tell us who she is. She didn't tell Bernadette, I was the one that was conceived immaculately. She says, I am the Immaculate Conception. So she is immaculate. She's the Immaculate Conception. She's perpetual virgin. She is the mother of God, and she's assumed into heaven. That tells us who she is. But then her active role also flows from that same New Eve reality. When John sees, in John 11:19, I see the Ark of the Covenant, and there were peals of thunder and lightning, and all these other manifestations of a theophany. And then the next verse in John 12:1, there is a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon on her feet, crowned with a crown of 12 stars. We see the image really of Our Lady Guadalupe. And so we see this image of the new Eve, who's also the Ark. And so those are the two elements, why we offer her. It goes back to these two titles of hers, of who she is, and also to these two biblical typological images that go all the way back to the Church Fathers as Ark of the New Covenant and Second or New Eve.
So what role does she play specifically? Like, is her name mentioned a lot in the rite of exorcism? And do demons say anything about her in exorcism? Yeah,
this is kind of one of those phenomenon de factos in the field. It's that when there's rarely extraction. It just seems like there's again, just personal experience, and Father Ripperger echoes this, of course, with far more experience than I have, that there's a palpable presence of the Blessed Mother during an extraction of an evil. When she comes in, it's just game over. It's tap out, it's over. And it's and it's not just my feeling. I mean, you're at a section and the priest is doing the litany of Loretto, invoking the Blessed Mother, extemporaneously, etc. So, because of that role as a new Eve, I've mentioned this to you before. One session, the priest was doing the litany of Loretto, invoking the Blessed Virgin Mary, invoking her presence, inviting her, and the demon says to him, "Oh, her, every time you call her, she comes, she wraps her mantle around you. She's the spouse of God." The spouse of God, have you read?
Wow.
Have you read St. Maximilian Kolbe? And this spousal union of Mary and the Holy Spirit, because she is. Who is God's father, right? Who is not Joseph, right? She's a spouse in a spiritual way, but bodily bears in her body. I'm not sure if you know Father John Calloway.
Sure.
He's got a good book he wrote years ago. And
The Marian.
Yeah, he's a Marian father. Yeah. Great. He's got a great Mariological mind. I really like him. He discovered this, and I think, because I've done some research, and I think he's the first to really find this, a fact, physiological fact in medical science called fetal microchimerism. Have you heard of this?
No.
And so a chimera is the Greek chi, X. A chimera in ancient lore was a beast that had various body parts, a crossover between various creatures.
Right.
Okay, that's a chimera or chimera. So fetal
A mixture of different animals.
A mixture of different beasts, so to speak. Now that's just lore. So that's where the chimera, the X, is from the Greek chi. So fetal microchimerism means that they're finding that fetal cells pass from the child. I mean, from the infant to the mother. They're finding fetal cells 30 years or more later in the mother's body. So in your wife's body, there's the fetal cells of your children still in her body. And these fetal cells are militating for health. They're fighting infection and disease. They're increasing maternal functions, such as breast milk production, So these cells of the children, of the fetal cells, even if these children never came to full term.
I'm sitting here saying my wife's had 20 pregnancies and 20. Literally. So imagine how much are floating through her.
Right. She's going to be like Uberwoman.
Well,
she's going to live to be 100.
Okay. Well, check this out. Her great-great-grandmother, there's an article in the paper kind of proves it. She lived to be 110.
Yeah.
So, and my wife is, I joke with my wife, like, I'm the first of her 3 husbands.
Oh, no, for sure. Yeah. She's going to I remember him. He was my first husband. I married that guy. Yeah. He only lived to be 90.
Right.
Yeah. But
imagine how many of my children's fetal cells have, made at least temporary, residence in my wife. That's kind of a remarkable idea. And the strength, the physiological strength that can provide her.
And again, we talk about analogy of being, going back to Augustine, that all things in being points to God somehow.
Right. So what's this analogy here that we're working on?
So this is a long way of getting back to the point. Imagine if the fetal micro cells in your body are the God-man.
We're divine.
We're Jesus. We're divine.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. He's not 50% human and 50% divine. He's 100% human. 100%.
Or just even having imagine even St. Anne, who would have carried a totally spotless human child in her womb. I mean, that would have had
the Immaculate, the Immaculate Conception.
Right.
And so we always, again, Catholics don't know the theology. We think that Jesus was immaculately conceived in Mary's womb. No. Immaculate Conception is Mary's preservation from grace. So we're doing again, all the catechesis that I did with cases over the years, kind of in my book. But there was one story I want to share. So I'm doing catechesis on the Immaculate Conception, and I quote in here Duns Scotus, Blessed Duns Scotus, and
he was one of the defenders of the Immaculate Conception, even against Thomas Aquinas, who was not.
Right. So he because of the physiology of the day, it's a complicated debate. But it's not he was against it. It was they understood the soul being infused, quickening at 30 days or something like that. So, but what Scotus said was that there's he termed the phrase, preservative redemption, right? And so that she, through the merits of Christ, who is out of time, right? Who is above time, who is all time is present, the kairotic time of God. applies the merits of salvation to Mary at the moment that she was conceived in her mother's womb to preserve her from the stain of original sin. Because if she is like us if Christ is like us and always accepts sin, and we inherit original sin, as we talked about in our last segment, we inherit an original sin as a privation of grace. How could he who is like us and always accepts sin have inherited anything but a perfectly sinless nature? So she receives a perfect sinlessness by being preserved from the effects of the fall. Mm-hmm. Right? So she has a nature that is higher than ours, that is more perfect than ours. Right? She's not a super hero, but her nature is, she shares in preternatural gifts that we do not because of the fall. And so we see this, her preservation. It makes sense if the effect of the fall is what St. Paul says: sin, because of one man's sin, Adam, sin and death enter into the world. Right. So we have sin.
I was going to say darkness of intellect, weakness of will, proneness to evil.
Yeah. Those are the wounds of the fall. Okay. But the sin and the corruption of bodily death. And so we know that if she had to give a perfect sinless nature to Christ, she was preserved from the fall and the effects of the fall. She had no original sin, so therefore she is immaculately conceived. But at the end of her earthly life, if the second effect of the fall
death
is body,
that's the assumption.
Then she was bodily assumed. This is why Pius XII said this was the natural consequence of the Immaculate Conception. So I'm trying to explain this in a catechetical session.
To who? To somebody who's
possessed. And normally they don't. We never get manifestations unless they're a real fast mover, man. I mean, you're talking one of those, and so unless it's really a hot case, and even then they generally don't manifest when we're just doing our catechetical work because we're working on the authority of the bishop and the exorcist. So I'm explaining this. So I'm like, well, so there's two ways you can fall. And it was a feast of the Annunciation. And on Marian feast days, on every feast day, like yesterday, the feast of St. Canute, right? So Knut Rockne. So hopefully special graces for the Irish, So every feast day in the liturgical calendar, we have the charism is poured out again into the church. St. Sebastian, right? That's my oblate name, St. Sebastian Mary. Yeah, he's the patron saint of soldiers. So on Marian feast days, special graces pour out into the church.
And I just have to say, we are recording this on the Feast of St. Sebastian. How cool is that?
Yeah, it's totally cool. Yeah. So on Marian feast, so I knew that. I'm like, I'm with her. Yeah. I can get away with a little more mouth than usual, right? Yeah. So I'm just laying down DDT, devil defeating theology. I'm like, all right. So I'm like, okay, there's two ways you can fall in. There's a pit. And original sin means there's this huge pit that man falls into and has to be pulled out of through grace, right? Through baptism, man is pulled out. There's two ways, but that's the normal way. We walk into a pit, we have this privation of grace, we get the restoration of grace and pulled out of the pit, and the image of God is now been restored to the likeness of God. We have image and likeness restored through baptism. But there's a second way that you could be preserved from ever falling into the pit. So I'm explaining this to this person, and she's looking, and then all of a sudden the demon manifests and says, yeah, I get it. Duns Scotus, preservative redemption. I've heard it before.
Oh my God.
And of course I'm just like Mr. Cool, man. I'm like helicopter pilot, like.
I bet you the subject probably had no idea about that.
Oh no, this person had no idea. They had no. Even the people my team members that were with me had no idea. I'm getting ready to throw down Duns Scotus and Scotin a theology on the theology of original sin and preservative redemption.
Yeah.
We're fighting an ancient enemy, and so there's nothing more ancient than the woman who would crush the head of Redeemer. Here's an analogy that I use. When we were tank killers. That was our job as a Cobra pilot. Our primary job was kill tanks, reconnaissance, that sort of thing. Our tanks, we still have it. They came out with this technology years ago. It's called reactive armor. And reactive armor is, you have a metal tank that's super thick. On the outside of that, they wrap it with this armor that if a round penetrates it, it blows outward so the round doesn't penetrate into the tank and destroy the tank. It'll shake it up, but it won't penetrate because of the reactive armor. And so when I tell people on a practical level, I'll give you the theology of all the theological reasons why. But True Devotion to Mary, 10 books, consecrating yourself to the Virgin Mary Totus tuus ego sum, right? All that I am and I am. Totus tuus ego sum et omnia mea tua sunt ut super omnia benedicta. The prayer of consecration. Consecrating yourself to the Blessed Mother is wrapping yourself with her mantle. Wrapping yourself, and her mantle is reactive armor. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get hit. It doesn't mean you're not going to bump your head and get and it's going to scare the tar out of you. You're going to take rounds, but those rounds aren't going to penetrate your home, your family, your soul. She will preserve you in grace with the super merits that she possesses because of who she is.
3 of her titles that we can just talk about as you wrap up here: Vanquisher of Satan, Warrior Queen, the Lady in Blue.
Yeah.
I'm just beautiful.
Yeah.
Talk to us about those.
Yeah, the Lady in Blue, I was there was a bishop, we were doing some training for some priests in the Midwest, and the bishop there, we had lunch with him, and he was a cool guy. He said, I got to tell you a story. He said, when I was a young priest, he was being trained by the exorcist in Rome. I think he might have been old enough. It might have been Father Amor's mentor, Father Candido Amantini. So they're doing this, the priest starts doing this exorcism, this young son, he said it might have been a seminarian, but he was very young. And the demon manifests and said, I would absolutely destroy you if it weren't for the Lady in Blue standing behind you.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Lady in Blue, and it's also been apparitions children have, I think, said that about her.
Yeah.
The Lady in Blue, right?
Yeah, yeah. So it's beautiful. And again, the titles evoke something, about, there's some aspect of her that are evoked when we evoke her by these titles. We even see in the sessions visceral reactions from the demon, not just calling upon her name, but certain titles evoke it. So Vanquisher of Demons.
Warrior Queen.
Warrior Queen. My mom wears combat boots, man. That's what we're saying. She's the Warrior Queen. We have to understand that. But she wants, invites our participation in this battle. Catechism 409 says that all of man's history is one of dour combat with forces of evil. From the beginning of time, from the beginning of our fall, we entered into battle. Remember in the old rite, your kids were about, I don't know if they were confirmed in the old rite, and some bishops still do it, the koli or the slap, Yeah. They would confirm them and they give them a little slap, I
wish.
Yeah. But that was a medieval symbol, right, of a knight, and the slap reminds you that you are now entering into combat. When I went to Iraq, if I turned and ran, I'm a deserter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? A soldier cannot desert. We had reporters embedded with us. They could leave anytime they want. They're civilians, and they won't be prosecuted. But if I turned and ran, I go to army prison.
Yeah.
So the same thing. We are now members of the church militant, and so this is part of our dignity. We now become fighters, soldiers. St. Paul says, bear your share of the hardship of the gospel like a good soldier for Christ. And who's the Queen of Armies? The Blessed Mother. She's the Queen. I think Saint Bernardino, she must be horrible to the demons like an army in battle array. So her titles evoke something about her reality.
Well, we'll continue to pray for her intercession.
Absolutely.
And I'll pray that she intercedes for you in your ministry.
And for 10 books, I'll pray for that and your continued blessing for you, for all the good that you do for the church.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
It's been a hell of a day. Thank you so much.
Day. Thank you.
All right, take care.
God bless.
Hey, thanks guys for checking out the Conor Gallagher Show. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, or comment, or whatever you got to do to support it. And I appreciate that very much.